Chapter 115. Pucci. A toothbrush sharpened into a sharp weapon and pierced his companion's throat. Blood splattered onto the ground as the corpse turned cold and stiff. Bang! A bluestone brick smashed into the back of a prisoner's head without warning, killing him on the spot. Stabbing eyes, kicking crotches, kicking sand, the majority of the prisoners who did not have weapons in their hands were using all kinds of despicable methods. At this moment, the thousands of prisoners had completely turned into a group of mad dogs. They were willing to do anything in order to become the 100 survivors and live a good life. Zhuang Dikun, do you still remember how you humiliated Lao Tzu when he first entered prison? Now, you can die for Lao Tzu. A skinny young man with a crazed and bloodthirsty face smashed a brick at a middle-aged man. A large amount of blood dyed his body red, but it made him laugh crazily. De Zhuang, you are my younger brother. We can only survive if we work together. A pair of brothers confronted each other. The older brother had a bitter expression as he tried to persuade his younger brother. Big brother, we are brothers. I believe in you. The younger brother put down the sharp iron ruler in his hand, which made the older brother happy. They were ready to face this game of death together. Pucci. Suddenly, the sharp iron ruler pierced through the older brother's heart. A cold feeling spread throughout the older brother's body. He slowly turned his head and saw his younger brother's cold and cruel eyes. Big brother, do you think I am a 3-year-old child? Even if you are my older brother, do you think I will trust you at this time? The younger brother growled fiercely. A line of clear tears flowed from the older brother's eyes. He trembled as he looked at his younger brother, who he had loved since he was young. His eyes were filled with endless sorrow. Big. De Zhuang. I never thought of killing you. You. Do you remember, when you were young, a group of hoodlums surrounded you with knives, said that they were going to hack you to death? It was I, your eldest brother, who protected you under my body. I was stabbed dozens of times. Big brother's voice trembled. Blood sprayed out from his chest, making him seem even more mournful and cold. At this moment, the younger brother's body trembled. He closed his eyes as the scene from back then flashed through his mind. A large amount of tears flowed from his eyes as he knelt on the ground. Big brother, don't blame me. Please don't blame me. I really don't want to die. The younger brother wailed loudly as if he had gone crazy. Pucci. The younger brother suddenly pulled out the iron ruler from his older brother's chest. A smear of blood sprayed on his face. The younger brother seemed to have turned into a walking corpse. He looked at his older brother, who was gradually losing his life, and his voice was cruel and ferocious. Big brother, don't worry. Although you're dead, I'll definitely survive. Let me carry your life and go see the wonderful world outside. Kill. The younger brother swung a sharp iron ruler as if he had gone mad. As long as the people around him were killed, he would ruthlessly and mercilessly stab at the other prisoners. Calm. Battle cries, angry curses, and anguished wails entered his ears. Madness was spreading, and the aura of slaughter was expanding. The thick smell of blood drifted in the air, making people want to vomit, but it also made the prisoners go crazy. On the high platform, Yi Xian had his hands behind his back. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only coldness and ruthlessness. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Heaven is merciless and treats all things as straw dogs. Earth is merciless and buries the souls of the dead in all ages. People are merciless and can kill in the world. Kill, fight. Only in the endless blood and fighting can you become my, Yi Xian's, lackeys and sweep away all obstacles in the world for me. Like the sound of the war drums of slaughter and the turmoil of hell, Yi Xian's voice was ruthless and cruel. However, it seemed to be a catalyst that made the prisoners completely bathed in blood and fight. Thousands of people killing each other was bloody and terrifying. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, it was an extremely terrifying thing. However, in Yi Xian's eyes, it was a transformation of the mind. Only by abandoning the 7 emotions and 6 desires of these prisoners and completely turning them into killing machines, Yi Xian wanted the men of sacrifice. What was a men of sacrifice? The meaning of life was to kill. This was the men of sacrifice in Yi Xian's eyes. The killing continued and blood sprayed. More and more corpses appeared on the field. It was as if it had turned into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It made people feel extremely horrified when they looked at it. Yi Xian looked at them indifferently. From beginning to end, he didn't show the slightest bit of pity. A few figures among them had also slightly attracted his attention. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was like a venomous snake. He was always in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to strike. He did not move, but when he did, several prisoners would die in his hands. A thin young man had a silly smile on his face. He had been squatting in a corner and eating the steamed bun in his hand. Although the steamed bun was soaked in blood, it did not affect his appetite at all. When he swallowed the last mouthful of the steamed bun, the smirking young man suddenly stood up. With a raise of his hand, all the prisoners closest to him died miserably. He kicked their genitals and blinded their eyes. He punched out and went straight for their temples. With a kick, the sound of knees breaking could be heard. No one could survive under his hands. In the pile of corpses, a wretched fatso was covered in blood. He looked like a corpse as he crawled in the pile of corpses. He only held a sharp chopstick in his hand. Every time a prisoner passed by him, this fatso would drag the prisoner's legs and make them fall to the ground. He would then stab the chopstick in his hand into the prisoner's throat at lightning speed. He would then continue to play dead and wait for the next prey to come. The killing continued and the prisoners wailed. On the high platform, Yi Xian's eyes were deep and he slowly nodded. Stop. The game is over. It was a simple word, but it sounded like a celestial voice. It also made the prisoners stop killing. They looked blankly at Yi Xian on the high platform, as if they had not woken up from the killing. The game is over. I'm still alive. I'm not dead. I can get out of here alive. The prisoners who survived could not believe that they were still alive. They looked around blankly and muttered to themselves. When they realized that they were indeed still alive, they burst into indescribable sounds of excitement. Ha! Lao Tzu is not dead. Lao Tzu survived. It's good that you're all dead. It's good that you're all dead. Lao Tzu can only survive if you're all dead. Cheers and crazy laughter. This was the scene that unfolded in front of Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian knew that although they survived, they had lost their humanity. From now on, they would completely turn into killing machines that would be used by him. Chapter 116. The prisoners were cheering, but some were extremely calm. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was one of them. He stared at Yi Xian and strode forward. Sir, I have to say that your methods are extremely vicious. Isn't it time for you to fulfill your promise? Bang! Suddenly, there was an explosion in the void. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was sent flying. A large amount of blood spewed out of his mouth as he collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud. Thud, thud, thud. Yi Xian strolled down the arena until he was in front of the man with the gold-rimmed glasses. He stepped on the man's face with his wide foot. As he exerted force, his foot kept grinding on the man's face. I don't like your attitude. This is just a small lesson for you to remember who is the king and who is the subject. Yi Xian said coldly, do you understand? Understood. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses trembled slightly before Yi Xian moved his foot away. Then, he looked around at the few remaining prisoners and said coldly, from today onwards, you are my lackeys. If I tell you to go east, you will not go west. I don't want to know your former names. All you need to remember is that I, Yi Xian, am your master. Under my will, you will turn into mad dogs and tear apart all obstacles for me. Rumble. The void trembled and blood traces floated in the air. Yi Xian flicked his fingers and hundreds of blood-red runes entered the prisoners' foreheads. His eerie voice sounded at this moment. This is the blood-soul contract. As long as you are loyal to me, the blood-soul contract will not take effect. If you betray me, you will die without a burial place and will never be reincarnated. As Yi Xian spoke to hear, his voice paused for a moment before he continued, of course, I've always been a person who rewards and punishes clearly, so I definitely won't treat you unfairly. As long as you've contributed, I will bestow upon you extraordinary strength. This is also your reward. Now, you can leave this place with me. Under the complicated gazes of the prisoners, Yi Xian turned around and walked towards the outside world. This caused them to hesitate for a moment, but they still quickly caught up to Yi Xian. Outside the sports field, Zhang Bin and the other jailers were trembling, and their faces were extremely pale. They couldn't be blamed for acting like this. It was because they had personally witnessed the bloody incident that had occurred inside. To Zhang Bin and the others, this was something they would probably never forget for the rest of their lives. When the iron wire net was activated and Yi Xian appeared outside with a group of death row prisoners, Zhang Bin's face turned as white as paper. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely horrified expression, but he still bowed to Yi Xian while trembling. Mr. Yi. Looking at Zhang Bin's terrified expression, Yi Xian's expression was calm as he said, I'll have to trouble you for today's matter. I want to take these people away. Is there any problem? No, no problem. Zhang Bin forced a smile, his heart trembling as he thought, how could I dare to have any problem in front of a demon like you? Wouldn't that be courting death? Now, Zhang Bin only wanted to send this demon away as soon as possible because he would feel uncomfortable if Yi Xian stayed in front of him for even a moment longer. It was as if he was facing a ferocious beast that could swallow him whole at any time. Under Zhang Bin's respectful escort, Yi Xian finally walked out of the warden's gate with a group of death row prisoners. When these prisoners saw the light of day again, they breathed in the air outside fiercely. Some of them even cried out, proving how excited they were. In the suburbs of the capital city, in an abandoned factory, 100 prisoners had already changed into new clothes. Everyone's face was filled with excitement. In front of them, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. When his eyes opened and closed, there was a flash of blood-red light. No one knew what he was thinking. Thank you, Master, for letting us see the light of day again. Although the man with the gold-rimmed glasses was scheming, when he faced Yi Xian, he felt fear from the bottom of his heart. He was the first to bow. Thank you, Master, for letting us see the light of day again. The others quickly followed suit, causing a deafening sound to ring out in the abandoned factory. Looking at the respectful appearance of the 100 prisoners, Yi Xian nodded in satisfaction and said, You've proven yourselves to me by being able to survive the massacre of 1,000 people. From today onwards, the 100 of you will be divided into 4 groups. The first group, Dark Knight Ancestor, will be responsible for spying and assassination. The second group, Blood Fiend Ancestor, will focus on martial arts and clear all obstacles for me. The third group, Shadow Group, will infiltrate the major forces of the world and wait for my orders at any time. The fourth group, Grim Reaper Group, will become my personal guards and will follow my orders at any time. Following Yi Xian's orders, the 100 men were quickly divided into 4 groups, with 25 people in each group. However, everyone had a troubled look on their faces. Obviously, they knew that they were just ordinary people. How could they complete the orders given by Yi Xian in the future? Yi Xian had already expected this situation. Unknowingly, 4 books appeared in his hands and he casually tossed them to the man with the gold-rimmed glasses. The man quickly caught them, but he looked at Yi Xian with a slightly puzzled expression. From today onwards, you're the leader of the Dark Knight group. Your code name is Viper. These 4 cultivation methods are enough to allow you to advance from ordinary people to martial arts masters in 3 months. If you're extremely talented, you can even step into the innate realm. As Yi Xian's words fell, it immediately caused an uproar. The members of the 4 groups looked at the 4 cultivation methods with fanatical gazes, their eyes filled with excitement. Ancient warrior. Becoming a master in 3 months? This was something that they did not even dare to think about. However, this opportunity was right in front of them now. How could they not be excited? As Yi Xian continued to give orders, the remaining 3 group leaders were chosen. The leader of the Blood Fiend group was the young man with the silly smile. His code name was Steamed Bun. The leader of the Shadow group was the young man who killed his brother. His code name was Cold Blood. The last group, Grim Reaper group, was the wretched Fatso. His code name was Fatso Huang. I don't like being called master. You can call me Mr. Yi in front of outsiders. You can also call me Lord Ming in private, said Yi Xian calmly when everything was arranged. Lord Ming, then our group will be called. Fatso Huang probed. Yi Xian's eyes were deep as he pondered for a while. Then, he said softly, let's call it Underworld. Underworld? Fatso Huang mumbled to himself. It was as if these 2 words had a strange infectious power. They kept murmuring from the mouths of the members of the 4 groups. What they did not know was that the birth of Underworld in this abandoned factory today would make the forces of the world extremely fearful in the future. Everything was over. Other than Fatso Huang leading the Grim Reaper group to follow Yi Xian, the members of the other 3 groups all left the abandoned factory and rushed to Jiangnan City. Due to the presence of Zhuo Junting in Jiangnan City, Yi Xian had already instructed her to find a secret base for the members of the 3 groups to undergo a 3-month devilish training. Chapter 117. July was like fire, and the scorching sun was scorching. The afternoon sun was even more scorching. In such hot weather, most people would choose to stay in their houses with the air conditioner on, and drink some ice water to lower their body temperature. It was indeed a very suitable thing. Capital, Courtyard House, Yi Xian's temporary residence. Yi Xian was very relaxed. He rested on the rocking chair with his eyes closed, while the 25 death guards were sitting cross-legged and cultivating under the scorching sun. There was an explosion in the air, and they slowly opened their eyes. A cruel and cold bloody light flashed across the death guards' eyes. The energy around their bodies surged, causing the air around them to explode. Thank you, Ming Jun, for your nurturing. The death guards half knelt on the ground and thanked Yi Xian respectfully. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and said calmly, although I have performed the enlightenment technique on all of you, allowing you to step into the realm of ancient martial arts grandmaster within 3 days, this is after all an act of pulling up seedlings to help them grow. All of you now have strength, but you know nothing about the Tao of martial arts. You still need more training. As the team leader of the Grim Reaper, Fatty Huang didn't have the slightest bit of the dignity of a team leader. Instead, he smiled fawningly at Yi Xian like a merchant and said, your cultivation is peerless. For us to be able to become your personal guards is a blessing from our previous lives. Please pass down the path of martial skills to us so that we can improve further. Looking at Fatso Huang's servile appearance, Yi Xian smiled. He looked at Fatso Huang with admiration. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, Fatso Huang did not have any dignity, but in Yi Xian's eyes, Fatso Huang was the most terrifying one among them. Although he looked cheerful on the surface, he was definitely the most vicious and cruel person in Group 4. This was also the reason why Yi Xian made him the leader of the Death Guards. The so-called martial arts techniques, in my opinion, are just techniques to kill people. What you are going to learn is naturally not the so-called martial arts techniques of those ancient martial arts practitioners. What I am going to teach you is also a true killing technique. As Yi Xian's voice rang out, the Death God's personal guards listened attentively, constantly engraving the killing techniques that Yi Xian described in their minds. As for how much they could comprehend, it all depended on their own perception. It had been 3 days since Yi Xian established hell. Within 3 days, he had directly raised the Grim Reaper bodyguard from an ordinary person to an ancient martial arts master. This was also so that the Grim Reaper bodyguard could help him as soon as possible. If news of this spread to the outside world, some people would think it was a fantasy. However, in the eyes of Yi Xian, a cultivator in the crossing calamity stage, the so-called ancient martial arts grandmasters were nothing. If he wanted, he could promote these people to the innate realm. Just as Yi Xian was preaching, a melodious ringtone sounded. It made Yi Xian disperse the crowd and pick up the phone. Good, well done. Tell them to wait for me at the headquarters of the Martial Security Department. As Yi Xian hung up the phone, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The call was from Ling Long. She told Yi Xian that the 8 team leaders had returned and were waiting for Yi Xian's arrival. Fatso Huang, do you want to see the legendary Martial Security Department? Yi Xian asked with a smile. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Fatso Huang was shocked. He rolled his eyes and knew that Yi Xian wanted to train him. He quickly bowed and said, I've always heard that there are 8 team leaders in the Martial Security Department. They are all people with great skills. If I can meet them, it would be my good fortune. Yi Xian liked smart people very much. There was no doubt that Fatso Huang was a smart person. Yi Xian would spare no effort to train smart people who were loyal to him. Martial Security Department, I hope you won't disappoint me, Yi Xian muttered to himself. Then, he strode out of the door and let Fatso Huang follow quickly. Martial Security Department Headquarters, Conference Room. The 8 team leaders sat here. The Heaven Team and Xian Team were the newly appointed team leaders. Previously, White Wolf Minji had died at the hands of Yi Xian in the martial arts competition. It could be said that there was a great enmity between the 2 teams. As for these 2 new team leaders, they were both chosen from among the short ones. They were both originally vice-team leaders, and the 2 of them were only ordinary ancient martial grandmasters. Naturally, they knew Yi Xian, so it could be said that they were extremely afraid of him. However, the 2 teams had already formed enmity with Yi Xian. As the new team leaders, they naturally could not show any fear of Yi Xian. At this moment, they were sitting there with a serious expression. The other team leaders had different expressions. Only Azure Dragon's face was flushed red. He was looking forward to Yi Xian's arrival. Tap, tap, tap. A series of light footsteps came from outside the door. It also made the team leaders of the 8 teams change their expressions. They hurriedly stood up and looked outside the door. Yi Xian was dressed in black. His gray hair fell behind his head. He strolled into the conference room. Fatso Huang's face was full of unscrupulous smiles. He followed closely behind Yi Xian. When he saw the team leaders of the 8 teams, he bowed and bent his knees. His face was full of flattery. Greetings, Mr. Yi. The 8 team leaders cupped their fists and bowed. Their posture was extremely humble. Obviously, Yi Xian's battle with Li Huantian had completely established his supreme prestige. Yi Xian smiled. He gave off a temperament like the spring wind and rain. He leaned lazily against the seat in the center. Then, he looked around at the people present. No one dared to look at him. However, Yi Xian's actions made the team leaders of the 8 teams reveal a trace of dissatisfaction. This was because Yi Xian was sitting in the position of the secretary of Wu En. It symbolized the highest authority of the Wu En department. Of course, the secretary of Wu En was just an ordinary person. The 8 team leaders did not take him seriously at all. However, Yi Xian was different. Since the battle with Li Huantian, his reputation had spread and he had intimidated the members of the 8 teams. Now that he had taken the initiative to sit in this position, could it be that this person wanted to take charge of the entire Wu En department? When this thought appeared in everyone's mind, everyone's expression turned ugly. The atmosphere in the conference room was also clearly oppressive at this moment. Why are you all standing? Sit down. As Yi Xian's voice fell, the 8 team leaders held their breaths. It was obvious that this Mr. Yi did not come with good intentions. He faintly regarded them as his subordinates. This caused the 8 team leaders to feel extremely uneasy. Yi Xian leaned lazily against the chair and did not make a sound. Meanwhile, Fatso Huang stood beside Yi Xian with a flattering smile. However, the way he looked at the 8 team leaders vaguely revealed a sinister look. Tap, tap, tap. Yi Xian's fingers tapped on the conference table. A rhythmic sound was heard. An extremely oppressive atmosphere spread, causing the 8 team leaders to feel as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Finally, Tian Yu was the first to break the silence. He cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, you've been missing for half a year. Now that you've returned to the Wu and department, you've even gathered us here. Do you have any instructions for us? Ha! Yi Xian laughed. He really laughed. However, his laughter was chilling. I don't like to talk nonsense. Don't you know why I've gathered all of you here? Yi Xian said lazily. However, when his words fell into everyone's ears, they felt a chill in their hearts. Chapter 118. Everyone present already knew the purpose of Yi Xian's visit. It was to investigate the real culprit behind the murder of Yi Ling'er at the capital city airport half a year ago. However, with the blood soul beasts wreaking havoc in the outside world, how could they spare the manpower to investigate this matter for Yi Xian? Mr. Yi, the entire world is in chaos right now, and there are terrifying beasts wreaking havoc all over the country of Xia. If we mobilize the entire Wuhan department to help you find the real culprit, then the people who have been devastated will have no one to protect them. Please understand, Mr. Yi, Tian Yu said righteously. Sir, Tian Yu is right. Mr. Yi, you have to know that it's not that we don't want to help you, but the Wuhan department is in a terrible state right now. We really don't have the extra manpower to investigate this matter for you. That's right. The members of the expedition all over the country have suffered heavy casualties. If we recruit more people to investigate this matter, then our Wuhan department will be in even worse shape in this global chaos. The 2 newly appointed team leaders spoke at the right time. They even showed a sorrowful expression, as if Yi Xian was making things difficult for them. Although the other team leaders did not interrupt, they also looked troubled. It was obvious that they agreed with Tian Yu and the others. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was calm, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. However, when he opened and closed his eyes, he constantly swept his gaze across everyone present, causing them to feel a chill in their hearts. The entire conference room became deathly silent. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, Yi Xian slowly clapped, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. When Yi Xian placed his arms on the table and narrowed his eyes at everyone present, his voice was cold and strange. Righteous, moral kidnapping, impassioned. I think these words should be very suitable for you, right? If I force you to help me find the real culprit behind this, then I, Yi Xian, will not care about the lives of the people of Xia and completely not look at the big picture. As Yi Xian entered their ears, everyone's expressions changed, causing the atmosphere in the conference room to become oppressive. Ta, ta, ta. Yi Xian paced around the conference room. His face was expressionless, but with every step he took, it was as if he was stepping on everyone's hearts, making them feel breathless. The Martial Security Bureau has gathered many ancient martial ability users in order to protect the country. Half a year ago, before the world was in chaos, a terrorist attack happened in the capital of Xia country. Yi Xian paused for a moment. His voice gradually became sinister as he said, for such an important matter, the dignified Wuhan agency can't even find a single clue. Is it really impossible? Or perhaps you didn't even think of looking for it. Yi Xian directly tore apart this layer of window paper, leaving no room for the 8 team leaders. The Martial Security Bureau had been established in Xia country for hundreds of years. Who would believe that they couldn't find the mastermind? Yi Xian did not need to think to guess the truth. Back then, during the martial arts competition, he had killed the two team leaders, Ming Yi and Bai Lang. He had already formed a grudge with the two teams, and Tian Yu had also suffered at his hands. Half a year ago, Yi Ling was killed. Not to mention whether the other teams were sincere in investigating the matter, just these three teams were definitely perfunctory. Half a year had passed, and the world was in chaos. Tian Yu and the others used this as an excuse to tactfully reject Yi Xian. They even used the blood soul beast as an excuse to show their helplessness. If Yi Xian threatened them, it would show that Yi Xian did not look at the big picture. This could be said to be a blatant conspiracy. Yi Xian was not in the right at all. If news of this spread to the outside world, it would instead show that Yi Xian was a sinner of Xia country. When Yi Xian exposed the thoughts of Tian Yu and the others, it caused their faces to turn pale. Their bodies unconsciously trembled because they discovered that Yi Xian's body was currently filled with dense killing intent as he sinisterly stared at them. Mr. Yi, it's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. We've really tried our best. Recalling Yi Xian's vicious methods, Tian Yu realized that he had made a huge mistake. He had been playing tricks with Yi Xian. Not only was Tian Yu's face pale, but the newly appointed team leaders of the Tian and Xian teams were also trembling uncontrollably. The two of them had played a role in this matter. How could they not be afraid? You guys are afraid of me? Yi Xian smiled as he walked up to the three of them. But this caused them to stumble back. Their foreheads were sweating profusely, and their knees were trembling uncontrollably. No, no. The team leader forced out a bitter smile. The leader of the Xian group forced a laugh, but his smile was even uglier than crying. He'd personally witnessed the former team leader die at Yi Xian's hands. How could he not feel fear when Yi Xian displayed such an attitude? Mr. Yi. You are a guest of the Earth team, and also a member of the Wu-En department. I will definitely help you find out the culprit behind this. Tian Yu stuttered. He was truly afraid. He could feel that if he were to reject Yi Xian again, he would turn into a cold corpse the next moment. Ha! Yi Xian smiled sinisterly and patted Tian Yu's shoulder affectionately. I won't kill you today, but I'll give you a chance. Within 3 days, I want to find out who the culprit behind this is. If you can't find out, you can come back to me with your head. Strong, domineering, fierce. This was Yi Xian's attitude. He didn't give Tian Yu any face at all. Tian Yu's face was completely red. Under Yi Xian's domineering gaze, he didn't dare to look him in the eye. He really wanted to let go and fight Yi Xian, and even more, he wanted to redeem his dignity. But Tian Yu knew very well that he wasn't Yi Xian's opponent. Unless he didn't want to live anymore, if he went against Yi Xian, only death would await him. Remember, don't play any tricks in front of me. If there's a next time, not only will you die, your family will all die without a burial ground. Do you remember? Yi Xian said calmly. But Tian Yu and the others were sweating profusely. They nodded repeatedly, not daring to disobey. Yi Xian nodded his head in satisfaction as he looked at Tian Yu's pale face. Then, he looked around at everyone, causing everyone to quickly avert their gazes. They didn't dare to look at Yi Xian in the slightest. You can all leave. Do you want me to keep you for dinner? Yi Xian's deep voice woke everyone up. They hurriedly bid farewell to Yi Xian and walked out of the meeting room. Where was the dignity of a team leader? In the meeting room. Fatso Huang bowed beside Yi Xian. His face was filled with indescribable excitement. Today, he had seen Yi Xian's true terror. Even the 8 team leaders of the Wuan department had to bow their heads in front of Yi Xian. Following such a master, his future was limitless. Fatso Huang. Your subordinate is here. What did you learn today? In the face of absolute power, so-called authority is nothing but fleeting clouds. Yi Xian was very satisfied with Fatso Huang's answer. This also proved that he hadn't misjudged him. Chapter 119. In the meeting room. Only 2 people remained. One was Qing Long, and the other was Xue Ji. These 2 people could be said to be the closest to Yi Xian. There was no need to mention Qing Long's relationship with him, while Xue Ji naturally stood on Yi Xian's side because of Lu Bai. At this moment, Azure Dragon's face was filled with guilt because half a year had passed. Due to the appearance of the Blood Soul Beast, he'd been fighting all over the place and didn't have the time to find the real culprit behind the scenes. This caused him to feel ashamed when he faced Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, Qing Long is useless. I need you to come personally to solve this. Qing Long bowed, his voice full of guilt. You don't need to blame yourself. This is not your fault. After all, Tianyu and the others were already dissatisfied with me. How could I make the Wuan agency work together to find the culprit? Yi Xian smiled. Mr. Yi, why didn't you kill them just now? Xue Ji was confused. She knew very well what kind of person Yi Xian was, which made her ask. I'm a very reasonable person, and I don't kill innocent people. Although they are dissatisfied with me, it's not enough to make me want to kill them. Yi Xian smiled. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the 3 people's gazes became strange. If someone else said that, they would feel that there was nothing wrong with it. However, when it came from Yi Xian, they felt that it was a fantasy. It was no wonder that the 3 of them thought that way. The side of Yi Xian that he showed was really decisive. He did not seem like a soft-hearted person at all. Although the 3 of them were confused, they did not ask again. Mr. Yi, my master asked me to bring you something. Xue Ji took out a piece of jade and handed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian also took it. Without Xue Ji saying it, Yi Xian knew that it was Lu Bai who asked her to bring this piece of jade. Yi Xian stroked the jade and his eyes lit up. Then, he put the jade away and said, Thank Brother Lu for me. Tell him that I have always kept the promise I made in my heart. My master said that Mr. Yi is a dragon among men. In the future, you will definitely ascend to the 9 heavens. To be able to form a good relationship with Mr. Yi today is also our lineage's fortune. Xue Ji bowed. The Azure Dragon did not understand the conversation between the 2. He had never known that the Desolate Group's group leader had a master. However, it was not appropriate for him to interrupt too much. After all, this was Xue Ji's own secret. Mr. Yi, the world is in chaos now. Terrifying beasts are wreaking havoc all over the world. Even Xia is no exception. Your martial arts are extraordinary. If you can, without waiting for the Azure Dragon to finish, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted him. His expression became solemn as he said, Azure Dragon, on account of our relationship, I have to tell you something. The truly terrifying thing is not these beasts, but the blood souls that are hidden in the human world. They are invisible and formless. Perhaps they are right beside you, but you will not know. As time passes, they will continue to devour blood and qi. Their cultivation will grow day by day. In the future, they will show their true fangs and bring an unimaginable disaster to this world. Let me give you a piece of advice. Leave the Martial Security Bureau as soon as possible and live out your life peacefully. Do not fight with these blood soul beasts again because humans cannot stop their footsteps. As Yi Xian's words entered his ears, the Azure Dragon's expression changed drastically. He could tell from Yi Xian's words that this Mr. Yi Xian seemed to be very familiar with these terrifying things that appeared all over the world. No, absolutely not. You don't know. In the past 6 months, there was Sword God Yi, Senior Ba Dao, and Jixia Academy's Martial Divine Faculty, the Azure Dragon anxiously refuted, but before he could finish, Yi Xian smiled contemptuously. His gaze became even more profound. Mortals are mortals after all. In terms of life, they have already fallen behind. In the future, you will know the true terror of these blood-soul beasts. Yi Xian sighed. Bang! All of a sudden, the azure dragon suddenly knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing to Yi Xian. This also made Yi Xian frown. He said, Azure Dragon, what are you doing? Mr. Yi, since you know so much about these terrifying things, you must have a way to destroy them. The Azure Dragon begs you. For the future of mankind, for the Xia, please save those innocent people. Hearing the Azure Dragon's pleading words, Yi Xian was stunned and fell into silence. Mr. Yi, you are also from the Xia. Do you really have the heart to watch the people of the Xia die in the mouths of these blood-soul beasts? The Azure Dragon begged bitterly and kept kowtowing to Yi Xian. Blood flowed from his forehead. People of the Xia. That's right, I do have a way to completely exterminate the blood-soul beast, and it's the land of China that raised me. However, I definitely won't use such a method. Yi Xian muttered to himself as a trace of self-ridicule flashed through his eyes. Azure Dragon, get up. It's not that I, Yi Xian, am cold-blooded and heartless, treating the people of the Xia as nothing. It's just that this is the cycle of heaven and earth. Since humans have such a calamity, they can only rely on themselves to get through it. Mr. Yi. Hearing Yi Xian's resolute words, the Azure Dragon's face turned pale. He wanted to continue persuading Yi Xian. Azure Dragon, you are a true hero. You are not afraid of death and worry about the country and the people. However, I, Yi Xian, am not a hero, nor am I an ancient sage. Don't mention this again. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the outside world. He also let Fatso Huang quickly follow. Looking at Yi Xian's departing figure, the Azure Dragon's face was filled with unwillingness. He said in a sorrowful voice, Mr. Yi, the Azure Dragon only wants to ask you one thing. Since you have a way to destroy these blood-soul beasts, why are you standing by and watching? Unfortunately, Yi Xian gradually walked away and did not answer the Azure Dragon's question. This also caused the Azure Dragon to pound his fists on the ground and sink into extreme pain. Mr. Yi, I, Azure Dragon, have misjudged you, but I will never give up. The scorching sun roasted the earth. Yi Xian walked slowly, releasing an extremely gloomy aura around him. Fatso Huang did not dare to make a sound and silently followed behind him. All of a sudden, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. He looked at the world in all directions and murmured, Do you think that I am cold-blooded and heartless, ignoring the fact that humans are gradually being devoured by the blood-soul beasts? You have your own thoughts. This subordinate does not dare to make wild guesses. Fatso Huang bowed, but there was a puzzled look in his eyes. Since Yi Xian knew the way to completely destroy the blood-soul beasts, why did he stand by and watch? Ha! Yi Xian laughed self-deprecatingly. His voice was as soft as a mosquito as he said, If I want to destroy the endless blood-soul beasts, I need to set up the 10,000 spirit heaven killing formation all over the world. With my mere cultivation at the tribulation stage, I will die if I really activate this Tongtian killing formation. Perhaps I am very selfish, but I only want to live. As for the life and death of others, what does it have to do with me? Yi Xian laughed self-deprecatingly and walked forward slowly. His strange words made Fatso Huang extremely puzzled, but he did not dare to ask. Chapter 120. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. News of Yi Xian's return to capital city spread like wildfire, even reaching the ears of some transcendental forces. However, in this new world, there were countless experts all over the world. Although Yi Xian had defeated Li Huantian, he didn't attract much attention under the cover of these experts. After all, the terror of the blood-soul mutated beasts was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. When the experts all over the world displayed their terrifying strength and went to fight these terrifying beasts, some people added fuel to the fire. These battle scenes were recorded and uploaded onto the internet for all to see, making these experts even more well-known. Chaotic times. Everyone worshipped the strong. Without a doubt, these experts were the hope of humanity. Under the cover of these experts, Yi Xian's reputation paled in comparison. Capital City, Courtyard House, Yi Xian's residence. It had to be said that the Martial Security Bureau was very efficient. In just 3 days, with Tian Yu as the leader and the 17 leaders as support, a series of clues were presented to Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, after our repeated investigations, the real culprit behind this should be a foreign man. This person wears a ghost mask all year round and has been hiding in Xia. Tian Yu pushed a photo in front of Yi Xian. In the photo was a man wearing a ghost mask, but the photo was slightly blurry. It was obvious that there had been a lot of shaking when it was taken. Although Yi Xian had a vague suspicion that this was the work of the ghost mask man, he was finally certain when he saw the photo in front of him. After all, in the entire capital city, only the ghost mask man could take out so many technological weapons. However, Yi Xian didn't expect that the ghost mask man didn't leave Xia after the Nangong family incident. Instead, he hid in capital city and even dared to make a move on his family half a year ago. Where is the person who took the photo now? Have you found out his true identity? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and asked. Tian Yu smiled bitterly and shook his head. The person who took the photo is already dead. By the time our people arrived, the other party was already gone. However, they found a large number of technological weapons. In that case, there are still no clues. Yi Xian frowned. Looking at Yi Xian's dissatisfied expression, Tianyu's body tensed up as he hurriedly explained, although this person is already dead, we've also discovered an important clue. That means these technological weapons were all smuggled in from abroad. To be able to secretly transport such a large amount of technological weapons into the capital, this grimace man is definitely not a nobody. You mean to say that the masked man is an international businessman on the surface, and that's why he has the ability to transport these weapons to the capital? Yi Xian asked. That's right. Using this as a lead, we found dozens of famous foreign businessmen in the capital. This is all their information and background. Tian Yu quickly pushed a document in front of Yi Xian. Every page of the document had a picture of a foreign man. Yi Xian kept flipping through the pages. After a full hour, Yi Xian closed the document. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was a cold glint in them as he fell into deep thought. Mr. Yi, although these foreign businessmen are very suspicious, their identities are not simple. If we secretly arrest them, it will definitely cause a lot of public criticism, Tian Yu said carefully. Dong dong dong. There was a series of knocks on the door. Fatso Huang quickly walked in with a golden invitation in his hand. He bowed and said, Sir, the Martial Arts Heavenly Province has sent an invitation to you to attend a charity banquet tomorrow. No time. Fatty Huang's expression froze when he heard Yi Xian's refusal. He probed in a low voice, Mister, the Martial Heavenly Palace is extremely powerful and was created by the Absolute Heaven Saber God. Do you want to reconsider, Yi Xian frowned and immediately stopped Fatso Huang's words. He quickly turned and left. Obviously, he could see Yi Xian's dissatisfaction. If he continued to talk nonsense, he would definitely be scolded by Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, the Martial Arts Heavenly Province is at its peak and has the potential to suppress our Martial Security Department. If you don't give the Martial Arts Heavenly Province any face, I'm afraid that this Absolute Heaven Sword God. Tian Yu wanted to say something but stopped. This is not something you should be concerned about. Yi Xian sneered. Tian Yu was embarrassed and did not say anything else. Tap, tap, tap. Yi Xian's fingers tapped on the table, making rhythmic sounds. After a full 10 breaths, Yi Xian's fingers paused. He looked up at Tian Yu and said, Hold a business banquet in the name of the Martial Security Department and invite these foreign businessmen. I want to meet them personally. Yes, Mr. Yi. Tian Yu bowed and left. From the beginning to the end, he had a respectful expression. From this, it could be seen that Yi Xian had become the #1 person in the martial security department. No one dared to disobey his orders. As Tian Yu left, Yi Xian's face darkened. The masked man dared to attack his family and Yi Xian had already sentenced him to death. Crack. Suddenly, while Yi Xian was deep in thought, the sound of jade breaking came from outside. It was mixed with extremely disdainful scolding. This also made Yi Xian's face turn gloomy. Don't think that your master is invincible just because he defeated Li Huanjun. In front of the martial arts heavenly province, no one dares to refuse our invitation. In the courtyard house, a young man was arrogant and scolding Fatso Huang loudly. Fatso Huang's face was full of flattery and he kept nodding and bowing. The rest of the death god's guards looked on coldly and did not say anything. Creak. The door was pushed open and Yi Xian walked out slowly. When the young man saw Yi Xian appear, not only did he not show any respect, he even sneered and said, "You must be Mr. Yi Xian, right? You're so arrogant that you dare to refuse the invitation of the martial arts heavenly province. Don't you know who founded the martial arts heavenly province?" Unfortunately, Yi Xian directly ignored this person. His expression was slightly cold as he said, "Fatty Huang, if you can't even do something like this, what use do I have for you?" After Yi Xian said that, he turned around and returned to the house. This made Fatso Huang's expression change drastically. His flattering smile suddenly turned gloomy and his eyes were filled with viciousness as he looked at the young man. Seeing that Yi Xian ignored him, the young man seemed to have been greatly insulted and shouted angrily, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Can't you hear me?" Bang! With a muffled sound, his bones broke. Before the young man could react, he was thrown out like a kite with a broken string. A large amount of blood spurted out of his mouth and he completely fainted on the ground. Fatso Huang's face was vicious as he said to the death god's guards, "Break his limbs, destroy his cultivation, and throw him out." "Yes, leader." The death god's guards smiled viciously and left to carry out the order. In the house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. As he breathed in and out, streams of blood energy inhaled and exhaled from his mouth and nose. He was already immersed in his own cultivation. As for the so-called martial heavenly palace, how could Yi Xian place it in his eyes? Chapter 121. Mountain River Pavilion. This was a 5-star hotel. In the entire country of China, it was an extremely high-end place. In a place like the capital where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, to be able to open a hotel like the Mountain River Pavilion, the power behind it was naturally not simple. That's right, the boss behind the Mountain River Pavilion was the Martial Security Department. This was also a high-end hotel under the Martial Security Department. Mountain Sea Hall. It was resplendent and luxurious. A bright red carpet, polite waiters, and expensive ingredients were placed on the table. In the middle of the Mountain River Hall, Yi Xian sat in the main seat. On his left and right were Tian Yu and Fatso Huang, and on his right and left were the various team leaders and guests of the Martial Security Department. This was a business banquet held by the Martial Security Department. However, in the entire Mountain Sea Hall, other than Yi Xian and the others, the so-called business celebrities were nowhere to be seen, let alone those international businessmen. Right now, Yi Xian was in a very bad mood. Really, really bad. When Yi Xian was in a bad mood, someone would definitely be unlucky. Tian Yu was extremely embarrassed and his face was flushed red. The other team leaders and guests were the same. They did not expect that after the Martial Security Department sent out the invitation, not to mention these foreign businessmen, even the local business celebrities did not come to the banquet. Contempt, disregard, humiliation. These simple words explained the current situation of the Martial Security Department. I need you to give me a reasonable explanation. In the oppressive atmosphere, Yi Xian spoke calmly. However, when Tian Yu and the others heard this, their hearts turned cold. They did not know how to answer Yi Xian's question. Mr. Yi, the Martial Heavenly Palace is also holding a charity banquet today. I believe these businessmen. Fatso Huang wanted to say something but stopped. However, the atmosphere in the Mountain Sea Hall immediately became heavy. Ha! A cold smile appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He looked around at Tian Yu and the others and said in a strange voice, the dignified martial security department has stood tall in China for 100 years. Now, even a martial heavenly palace has suppressed you. Don't you feel ashamed? Yi. Mr. Yi. You don't know. Tian Yu's face flushed red as he hurriedly explained, the martial Tao heavenly abode was created by the Absolute Sword God. 100 years ago, the Absolute Sword God was the fifth most powerful man in the world. Legend has it that he had broken through the Xiantian realm and stepped into the Earth God realm. Countless disciples from various ancient martial arts families have joined the martial Tao heavenly abode. Without waiting for Tian Yu to finish speaking, Yi Xian's expression darkened as he waved his hand to interrupt him. His gaze towards Tian Yu and the others gradually became sinister. This is the reason you gave me? Yi Xian said coldly. Instantly, the temperature in the air plummeted, as though a cold wind was blowing at the backs of Tian Yu and the others, causing them to feel as though they had fallen into an ice cellar. Do you know that what happened today is not only a disgrace to you, but also a disgrace to me, Yi Xian? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His voice was calm, but it caused Tian Yu and the others to tremble uncontrollably. Their faces were extremely pale as they were clearly unsettled by Yi Xian's words. Suddenly, Yi Xian stood up from his seat. A 3-foot-long blood sword strangely appeared in his hand. When Yi Xian slashed out with his sword, the terrified screams of many waiters could be heard. Bang! The sword flashed across the sky and the banquet was shattered. Under Yi Xian's sword, the so-called business banquet was reduced to a pile of debris. Tian Yu and the others were nervous, not daring to say anything. Fatso Huang. Yes, sir. I'll give you 3 minutes to find out where the martial Tao heavenly abode is hosting the banquet. As soon as Yi Xian's voice fell, Fatty Huang's expression turned into one of shock. However, he quickly accepted the order and left. On the other hand, Tian Yu and the others were stunned for a moment before their expressions quickly turned to fear. Mr. Yi, what do you want to do? Tian Yu trembled as a sense of unease rose in his heart. What do I want to do? Yi Xian's lips curled into a cold smile, then he looked at Tian Yu and the others strangely. You can be shameless, but do you want me, Yi Xian, to be humiliated here with you? Since these businessmen are going to the martial Tao heavenly abode's banquet, what do you think I want to do? Looking at Yi Xian's gloomy face, Tian Yu and the others couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Their faces were filled with fear. A guest elder quickly stood out and advised Yi Xian with a trembling voice, Mr. Yi, you can't do this. The martial Tao heavenly abode is like the sun in the sky, and it was founded by the absolute heaven blade God. If you go and cause trouble, I'm afraid there will be a huge rift between the martial Tao heavenly abode and the martial Tao heavenly abode. That's right. Although the absolute heaven blade God isn't in the capital, the martial Tao heavenly abode is full of disciples of various ancient martial arts clans. If the martial Tao heavenly abode confronts the martial Tao heavenly abode, there will definitely be a conflict. As the saying goes, pull one hair and the whole body will be affected. Mr. Yi, please bear with it for now and don't get into a conflict with the martial Tao heavenly abode. As if a chain effect had occurred, everyone began to advise Yi Xian. Everyone's faces were pale. It was obvious that they were extremely fearful of a transcendent power like the martial heavenly palace. You guys are really a bunch of trash. Yi Xian shook his head in disappointment. His words didn't leave any face for the crowd, causing them to feel ashamed. They didn't dare to meet Yi Xian's gaze. Mister, I've found it. The martial Tao heavenly abode is holding a banquet at the Immensity Sea House. All the celebrities of the business world are there. Fatso Huang was extremely efficient. When he returned to Yi Xian's side, he quickly reported to him. "You've done well." Yi Xian slowly nodded, then took a deep look at Tian Yu and the others. Under everyone's panicked gazes, Yi Xian slowly walked out, and Fatso Huang quickly followed. "What should we do?" the leader of the Xian group said with a trembling voice. "Mr. Yi is right. How could our dignified martial Dao heavenly abode be afraid of us?" Xue Ji's face was filled with disdain as she quickly chased after Yi Xian. "That damned azure dragon. Where did he find such a god? Does he think our martial Dao heavenly abode isn't chaotic enough?" a guest said hatefully. "All right, Azure Dragon isn't here. What's the point of saying all this?" Tian Yu reprimanded. "Sir Tian Yu, what should we do now?" someone carefully probed. Seeing Yi Xian already far away, Tian Yu's face was filled with hesitation as if he was considering something. After several breaths, he clenched his teeth as if he had made a decision. He said, "Although this Mr. Yi is arrogant and has threatened us from time to time, he's still a guest of the martial Dao heavenly abode. If we just sit back and do nothing, we'll be laughed at by the outside world. Let's go. We'll accompany this Mr. Yi. After all, if anything happens, he'll take responsibility." As Tian Yu finished speaking, he led everyone to chase after Yi Xian. A banquet held by the martial Dao heavenly abode had become a joke. However, no one knew that this joke wasn't funny at all. This was because Yi Xian would let everyone know what would happen if they made fun of him, Yi Xian. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. No one knew what would happen. Chapter 122. Vast Sea Restaurant. It was a hubbub of voices and the atmosphere was warm. Countless business celebrities shuttled back and forth in the banquet. They greeted each other in twos and threes, holding red wine glasses in their hands and chatting with smiles from time to time. Gu Dingtian, the deputy mansion master of the martial arts heavenly palace, was beaming with joy at this moment. He smiled at the compliments of many business celebrities, giving people a sense of dignity. Gu Dingtian was very proud. Although he was only a martial arts grand master and had not even reached the primordial realm, he had great power in his hands. As the master of the Gu family, Gu Dingtian felt that it was the best choice he had ever made in his life since he relied on the towering Heaven Blade God. He liked the current world very much. In the previous world, the ancient martial arts families had hidden themselves. With the deterrence of technological weapons, they did not dare to act recklessly and could only live in seclusion. But now the world was different. The blood-soul exotic beasts were wreaking havoc all over the world, and technological weapons were of little use. The only thing he could count on was the ancient martial arts warriors. Even the martial security department, which he had once regarded as a giant, was nothing in Gu Dingtian's eyes now. It was Gu Dingtian's idea to hold this charity banquet. After all, more and more ancient martial artists were joining the martial arts heavenly palace, and all kinds of cultivation resources needed money to buy. Gu Dingtian felt very proud of himself. After he sent out the invitations, all the business celebrities of the state of Xia and foreign multinational businessmen came to attend. This was something that Gu Dingtian would never have dared to think about in his previous world. Although Gu Dingtian knew that there were a total of 8 deputy mansion masters in the martial arts heavenly palace and he was the weakest among them, he was regarded highly by the Heaven Blade God and was given great power to manage the entire martial arts heavenly palace. Gu Dingtian enjoyed the feeling of being in a high position and could not help but indulge in it. Because even the primordial realm masters had to respectfully call him Lord Gu when they met, which was something that would never happen in the past. Lord Gu is very busy every day. In order to train us human cultivators to fight against the mutated beasts, it can be said that you have worked hard and contributed greatly. Let us toast to Lord Gu, a merchant said flatteringly. You can't say that. The martial arts heavenly palace was created by Saber God to protect the people of the Xia. I'm just dealing with some trivial matters for Saber God. The one who really worked hard is Saber God. Gu Dingtian pretended to be dissatisfied, but his eyes were full of complacency. Lord Gu is right, without Senior Saber God, how could we, the merchants, be as safe as we are now? I'm afraid that we would have been slaughtered by those terrifying beasts long ago, but Lord Gu, you don't have to be modest. If not for your support, how could the martial heavenly palace be as grand as it is today? That's right. Right now, there are many experts in the martial Dao heavenly palace, fighting on the front lines for the people of China. Lord Gu has worked hard and contributed greatly. This is something that everyone can see. Isn't that right? With all kinds of flattery from the businessmen, a lot of responses came. Although Gu Dingtian didn't say anything, there was a sense of complacency in his eyes. Ahem. Gu Dingtian coughed slightly and pretended to be serious, saying, "Today, I call you here to raise funds. After all, you know that the warriors of the martial Dao heavenly palace are fighting with the exotic beasts day and night, and casualties are inevitable. However, funds are a shortcoming. Today, I am ashamed to ask you for help, but I have no other choice." Lord Gu, what are you talking about? Without the martial Dao heavenly palace, how could we be where we are today? Lianyun Group is willing to donate 10 million. Dingxin Group is willing to donate 20 million. Lotus Group is willing to donate 50 million. Suddenly, all kinds of donations came from the charity party. The local business celebrities of the Xia spoke one after another, which made Gu Dingtian smile and nod his head to express his gratitude. Mr. Gu, although I am not from the Xia, I have lived in the Xia for many years. Now that the exotic beasts are wreaking havoc all over the world, as a member of the human race, the Moore Group is willing to donate 1 billion yuan to the martial Dao heavenly palace. A blonde man came out from the crowd. He had fair skin and was extraordinarily handsome. He had the unique temperament of a Western aristocrat, which made people feel inferior at first sight. "Mr. Michel, you are too polite. I would like to express my highest gratitude to you on behalf of the martial Dao heavenly palace." Gu Dingtian looked excited and hurried to the man. His attitude was extremely friendly. It was no wonder that Gu Dingtian behaved like this, because the identity of the blonde man was extremely special. He was the president of the Moore Group's branch in the Xia, and the Moore Group was ranked in the top 100 in the world. It could be said that the Moore Group was a super business empire in business and in various fields. How could Gu Dingtian not pay attention to it? "Mr. Gu, you are too polite. Sword Saint Sith and Saber God are close friends, and Sword Saint Sith is the patron saint of the Moore Group. This money is just a small token of appreciation from the Moore Group to Saber God," Michelle said with a smile. "Sword Saint Sith?" Gu Dingtian was stunned, and then hurriedly asked, "Is she the senior Sith who cut off the mountain and killed hundreds of exotic beasts in the West?" "Yes, she is." The blonde man nodded with a smile. After getting the affirmative answer from the blonde man, Gu Dingtian's attitude became more friendly. He took the blonde man's hand intimately, as if they were close friends who had not seen each other for many years. "Mr. Michel, I didn't expect the martial Dao heavenly palace to have such a relationship with the Moore Group. Today, we must get drunk," Gu Dingtian said kindly. Bang! All of a sudden, a loud noise came and interrupted their conversation. The banquet door was blown up in an instant. Many businessmen in the banquet were shocked and looked toward the door. A slender figure, a bloodthirsty demon sword, and gray hair draped behind his head. Yi Xian walked in calmly. When he looked around at everyone present, many merchants immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Yi Xian, the guest of the Earth Group of the Martial Security Department? Is he Yi Xian who defeated Li Huantian? All kinds of discussions were heard. The blonde man was stunned by the sudden appearance of Yi Xian. There was a flash of fear in his eyes, and he stepped back quietly. Someone reported to the Martial Security Department that a large number of traitors were plotting a rebellion in the Immensity C building. Now, everyone present, please follow me back to the Martial Security Department for investigation. Slander, blatant slander, and even more so, an extremely clumsy framing. However, this was the attitude that Yi Xian displayed. After Yi Xian finished his words, Tian Yu and others quickly appeared behind him with complicated expressions. They had never thought that Yi Xian would be so bold as to frame so many people in such a blatant way. Yi Xian, we are all decent businessmen. How can you slander us? That's right. This is a charity banquet organized by Lord Gu. How can there be a conspiracy to rebel? Mr. Yi, although you are a guest of the Martial Security Department, you can't disregard the law and frame others like this, right? The businessmen present rebuked angrily. It was obvious that being labeled a traitor by Yi Xian was not a joke. It was an extremely taboo. The law. Ha, I am the law. A cruel sneer appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He looked around at the crowd and said in a sinister voice, if I say that you are traitors, then you are traitors. If I say that you are plotting a rebellion, then you are plotting a rebellion. Yi Xian did not need to hide anything. He was telling everyone present that he, Yi Xian, had slandered them. What could they do? What are you waiting for? Take them all away. Yi Xian frowned and reprimanded Tian Yu and the others. Tian Yu and the others' expressions changed, but they did not dare to disobey Yi Xian's order. They could only lead the crowd to stride towards the businessmen. It seemed that Yi Xian was really going to arrest them. Chapter 123. Stop. Without waiting for Tian Yu and the others to step forward to capture him, Gu Dingtian's face was filled with anger. He stood in front of Tian Yu and the others and looked at Yi Xian with extreme anger. Your Martial Security Department sure has guts to ignore the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace and cause trouble here. Gu Dingtian shouted angrily. A large number of ancient warriors appeared behind him, including several primordial experts. The two sides confronted each other. It was obvious that Gu Dingtian didn't put the Martial Security Department in his eyes at all. He glared at Yi Xian and said, Yi Xian, when this old man sent someone to invite you, not only did you not give face to the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace, you even crippled my people's limbs. This old man hasn't settled this debt with you yet, but now you actually dare to bully me? Do you really think that there's no one in my Martial Dao Heavenly Palace? Humph, the Martial Heavenly Palace is too arrogant. Instead of fighting with the exotic beasts, they framed us. Today's matter is not over. I'll report this to the Supreme Court and punish you for abusing your power. That's right. Although we're just businessmen, the Martial Heavenly Palace has gone too far by bullying us like this. Tianyu's face turned pale. He knew that things had gotten out of hand. Not only had the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace offended the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace, but they had also offended all the famous figures in the business world. If today's matter was reported to the higher-ups, they would definitely be punished. Chi. Blood light filled the air as sword cheese buzzed. A stream of fresh blood splattered out. The head of the merchant who had been shouting the loudest was separated from his body, turning into a cold corpse that fell limp to the ground. The entire charity banquet fell dead silent. Thud, thud, thud. Yi Xian walked forward slowly with the 3-foot blood sword in his hand. He looked around at the crowd and said in a cold voice, all the land in the world belongs to the king and all the people in the land are the king's subjects. The Martial Heavenly Palace is the most important weapon of the Xia country. We have the right to act first and report later. If anyone dares to make a fuss, you will end up like this man. Hiss. The sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air could be heard continuously. Everyone present unconsciously retreated. They looked at Yi Xian with a hint of fear in their eyes. Yi Xian killed on the spot without any reason. This was the attitude that Yi Xian had displayed. How could this not make everyone present feel terrified? Yi Xian. Gu Dingtian's eyes were bloodshot as he roared at Yi Xian. It was obvious that Yi Xian had killed someone in front of him. Not only did he not give face to the martial heavenly palace, he was also slapping Gu Dingtian's face. How could he not be furious? Today, I'm here. Let's see how you're going to take him away. Gu Dingtian waved his hand and the martial artists behind him showed their terrifying chi. Several primordial experts stepped forward and looked at Tian Yu and the others with disdain. Mr. Yi. They have the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, the martial Dao Heavenly Palace was created by Senior Saber God. They are not as good as us. Tian Yu reminded in a low voice. His eyes were filled with fear. Humph. Looking at Tian Yu's fearful expression, Yi Xian snorted coldly. A hint of disappointment flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian had never expected that the Martial Security Bureau would become so weak in just half a year. Was it still the national treasure that he remembered? Although Tian Yu's voice was soft, it was heard by Gu Dingtian. Gu Dingtian smiled disdainfully and said, Yi Xian, I advise you to go back to where you came from. I'll pretend that nothing happened today. Otherwise, if Senior Saber God knows about this, he will not let it go easily. Ha! Gu Dingtian's taunting words immediately caused a lot of laughter. This also made Tian Yu and the others blush. Apparently, they felt extremely humiliated. The Martial Security Bureau, which used to be superior, was humiliated by Gu Dingtian. No matter how good-tempered Tian Yu and the others were, they were filled with anger at this moment. Yi Xian sneered. He looked at Tian Yu and the others deeply and said, See. This is the current situation of the Martial Security Bureau. If you want to leave, you can leave now. But I have to tell you that from today on, the Martial Security Bureau will become a joke. Damn it. The leader of the Hong group was a hot-tempered man, and he was also an extremely hot-blooded man. He was the first to be unable to endure Gu Dingtian's ridicule. He cupped his hands towards Yi Xian and said with a flushed face, Mr. Yi, the members of my Hong group are at Mr. Ye's disposal. So will we. Everyone had a temper, let alone the members of the Martial Security Bureau. Under the response of many leaders, Yi Xian showed a strange smile on his face and said in a low voice, Those who violently resist the law will be killed. Those who refuse to confess will be killed. Do you understand me? The Martial Security Bureau is handling a case. Idlers, please leave. Tian Yu roared and asked the others to start arresting people. Gu Dingtian's expression changed slightly. He did not expect Yi Xian to have such a great influence in the Martial Security Bureau. Today, this old man would like to see just who you can capture. Stop them for me. Since they had already offended each other, Gu Dingtian had nothing to fear. He waved his hand and the warriors behind him smiled ferociously and rushed to the people of the Martial Security Bureau. Bang! The air exploded and swords flew across the sky. The two sides fought together and turned the whole charity banquet into a chaotic place. Shouts, roars, clanging of metals, and swords collided. A large number of businessmen screamed and some timid people even crawled under the table for fear of being hurt. At this moment, Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and looked calm. He had no intention of taking any action. He looked at the chaotic battle indifferently as if he was watching a child's play. In fact, Yi Xian did not have to go through so much trouble. With his cultivation and means, he could kill all the martial artists of the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace in an instant. Under his extreme means, these ordinary people would have to kneel down and bow to him. However, Yi Xian did not do so and did not want to do so. Because Yi Xian knew that if he did everything by himself, what was the use of the people of the Martial Security Bureau? Why did he build the Mansion of the Dead in the first place? Moreover, Yi Xian did not come here just to find trouble with the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace. He did not care about these so-called businessmen at all. Yi Xian's real purpose was to find the man with the grimace. As for these small fries, Yi Xian would naturally leave them to Tian Yu and the others. If they had to deal with such trivial matters personally, they would be treated as trash by Yi Xian. The two sides fought fiercely, but it was obvious that the Martial Security Bureau was at a disadvantage. After all, only Tianyu was a Khanate Realm warrior in the Martial Security Bureau, while the other side had 3 Khanate Realm experts. Although Xue Jie was a demon and in the Foundation Establishment Realm, she had already broken through to the Khanate Realm. However, she did not dare to show the strength of the Foundation Establishment Realm. After all, it would expose her identity. When Yi Xian was watching indifferently, a figure caught his attention. He narrowed his eyes and walked towards the person. Chapter 124. You know me. When Yi Xian arrived in front of the blonde man, his voice was very calm, but it made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Yi Xian's arrival made the blonde man hold his breath. Then, he revealed a noble smile and said, "The president of the Moore Group Xia Country Branch, Michelle, greets Mr. Yi." The blonde man was gentle and elegant. His posture was neither arrogant nor humble. He displayed the unique temperament of a Western noble. No one could find fault with him. Moore Group's Michelle. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He sized up the blonde man with a scrutinizing gaze. After a full 10 breaths, an unfathomable smile appeared on his face. "I think I've seen you somewhere before," Yi Xian said softly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Michelle's expression did not change. Instead, he smiled and said, "Mr. Yi, you must be joking. Although I've lived in Xia country for many years, I've never seen you before." "Oh." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm very sensitive to auras. As long as I've seen someone before, as long as they appear before me again, I can recognize them even if they turn into ashes." Buzz! The 3-foot-long blood sword suddenly appeared across the blonde man's throat. Yi Xian smiled strangely and said, "Do you think I'm right, Mr. Enter?" The cold tip of the sword and Yi Xian's strange and sinister gaze made the blonde man's expression change. He forced a smile and said, "Mr. Yi, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand?" "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. I'll let you slowly understand." Yi Xian smiled cruelly. When the sword slashed out, it directly cut off Michelle's right arm. A large amount of blood spurted out, causing the blonde man to cry out in pain. However, he did not resist at all. "Ah! Mr. Yi. You! Why did you hurt me?" The blonde man was sweating profusely from the pain as he cried out in horror. Looking at the blonde man's appearance, Yi Xian frowned. Could it be that he had guessed wrong? Was this person really not the masked man? Yi Xian had only met the masked man twice. The first time was when he came to Jingdu. The plane he was on had been attacked by terrorists, and the two of them had only met once. The second time was because of the Nangong family. He had seen the Grimace Man through a video call. Although this person's eyes and temperament were not similar to the man with the ghost face, Yi Xian, as a cultivator in the tribulation passing stage, was very sensitive to auras. He was very sure that this Michelle was the incarnation of the man with the ghost face. Yi Xian snapped out of his thoughts. He believed in his own judgment, which made him smile mockingly. "I have to say, you're a drama queen. If it were anyone else, they might really believe you. But in front of me, your acting is so clumsy." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the blonde man's expression changed slightly. However, he still cried out in grief and trembled. Mr. Yi. I really don't know what you're talking about. Please don't hurt me. If you want money, my Moore Group will not be stingy." Looking at the blonde man who was like a drama queen, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and sneered. "I have to say, you are a formidable person. Even in front of me, you are extremely calm. Your acting can be said to be flawless. Unfortunately, you still revealed a huge flaw." "What? What flaw?" The blonde man trembled as he spoke. Then, he suddenly woke up and hurriedly shut his mouth. However, his expression gradually turned cold. There was no longer the gentle and elegant temperament from before. Looking at the golden-haired man's change, Yi Xian laughed sinisterly and said, "Even an ordinary person would be able to dodge that slash of mine, but you didn't react at all. You allowed me to cut off your arm, and this is your biggest flaw." As Yi Xian's words fell, the golden-haired man's eyebrows drooped. His entire body was trembling, and a sinister laughter came out of his mouth. His entire temperament had changed drastically. Hee hee. The golden-haired man slowly raised his head. His face was filled with a sinister expression as he said in a cold voice, "I didn't expect that I would be so smart that you would recognize me." At this point, the golden-haired man paused for a moment before continuing with a sinister smile, "But so what if you recognize me? Yi Xian, I have to admit that I'm not as shrewd as you in terms of means. However, you should know that I'm now the president of the Great Xia branch of the Moore Group, and also the most distinguished guest of the martial arts divine mansion. You can't keep me here today." The golden-haired man laughed sinisterly. He got up quickly and ran directly to Gu Dingtian. He even cried for help, "Mr. Gu, help me. Yi Xian wants to kill me." Gu Dingtian was leading his men to fight with the members of the Martial Security Department. When he heard the golden-haired man's cry for help, his expression changed greatly, and he looked at him. When Gu Dingtian saw the golden-haired man covered in blood and lost an arm, he was completely stunned. Then, his face became extremely furious. "Yi Xian, you bastard, how dare you hurt Mr. Michel?" As Gu Dingtian roared, the two sides instantly separated. Under Gu Dingtian's fury, he quickly protected the golden-haired man in the center. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely sinister and murderous look. If Yi Xian had hurt someone else, Gu Dingtian would not have been so angry. However, who was Michel? He was not only the spokesperson of the Moore Group, but also Sword Saint Sith, who was a close friend of the Heavenly Saber God. Today, Yi Xian had cut off one of Michel's arms at the charity banquet held by Gu Dingtian. This was completely due to his failure to protect Michel. Therefore, Gu Dingtian had an unshirkable responsibility. If the Heavenly Saber God knew about this, he would definitely blame him. He was afraid that he would lose his position as the Deputy Mansion Master. Thinking of this, Gu Dingtian was full of hatred. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely terrifying murderous look. "Yi Xian, how dare you hurt the guest of the martial arts divine mansion? Today, either you die or I die." Gu Dingtian's eyes were bloodshot as he roared loudly. "Either you die or I die. You lowly ants." Yi Xian strolled over, surrounded by a bloody light. A cruel and ferocious smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. His voice echoed in everyone's ears. "The martial arts divine mansion is conspiring to rebel and overthrow the Xia country. From now on, anyone who goes against the Martial Security Department will be punished for treason. Anyone who resists will be killed on the spot." When Yi Xian said these words, the 3-foot blood sword flew out of his hand. The terrifying blood sword buzzed and released an extremely terrifying murderous aura. It vaguely covered Gu Dingtian and the others. "Kill him!" Gu Dingtian was completely mad. When he roared, all the martial artists behind him rushed toward Yi Xian violently. Since he had found the real body of the masked man, Yi Xian was no longer interested in entangling with this group of ants. "All of you can go to hell." Buzz! The blood sword shone in the sky and killed all of them. Rays of bloody light burst out from the blood sword. Yi Xian had one hand behind his back. Every time he slashed out, dozens of lives would be taken. Chapter 125. Blood, fresh blood, dyed the whole banquet red. A large number of broken limbs could be seen everywhere, and the air was filled with the strong smell of blood. The living creatures were wailing, and the dead souls were crying. A large number of martial artists were killed by Yi Xian, which made the businessmen who were watching the massacre scream in horror. Gu Dingtian's face turned pale, and he stared blankly at the scene in front of him. His back was already soaked with cold sweat. No, it's impossible, how can you be so strong? Gu Dingtian said to himself, trembling. At this moment, the blond man's face turned pale. He had never thought that Yi Xian would be so bold as to kill the people of the martial Dao Divine Prefecture. Wasn't he afraid that the heavenly saber god would seek revenge from him? Horror, fear, and despair were the feelings of the blond man. He tried to calm himself down and stepped back quietly. Apparently, he wanted to escape from this place. Puff! When the last martial artist turned into a cold corpse and fell at the feet of Yi Xian, the so-called charity banquet was dead silent, and a feeling of extreme fear spread in the air. Bang! Suddenly, a businessman knelt down on the ground and begged in tears, Don't kill me. I'm really not a traitor, spare my life. As if there was a chain effect, these so-called business celebrities knelt down on the ground one by one and kept begging Yi Xian to spare their lives. There were also a lot of cries and wails. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't even have the interest to look at these famous figures in the business world. Send all of them to the warden's office and interrogate them. Yi Xian said coldly and asked Tianyu and the others to take the order. They quickly led the members of the Martial Security Department to arrest these business celebrities one by one. At this moment, Gu Dingtian's body was trembling, and the blond man's face was gloomy, because they saw Yi Xian walking towards them. They knew that they could not escape from Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you killed the people of the martial Dao Divine Prefecture today. When the saber god knows about this, he will not let you go. Gu Dingtian roared fiercely, but if one listened carefully, one would notice that his voice was trembling greatly, which also proved the fear in his heart. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't take Gu Dingtian's threat to heart. In his opinion, the so-called absolute heaven saber god was no different from an ant. Wang! Yi Xian was cold and emotionless. When his palm swept through the air, a powerful suction force acted on the golden-haired man, instantly pulling him in front of Yi Xian. Crack! Yi Xian's jade-like hand grabbed the blond man's neck and lifted him into the air as if he was lifting a chick. His voice was calm as he said, You should have left Xia half a year ago. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance anymore. Tell me where your headquarters are, and I can leave your corpse intact. Ha! The golden-haired man's face turned purple and he found it difficult to breathe. He knew that he would die in the hands of Yi Xian, but there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he sneered and said, Yi Xian, kill me if you can. But let me tell you, this world is not as simple as you think. Someone will avenge me. Ha! Yi Xian laughed. He really laughed. It was a contemptuous laugh, as if he was watching a clown's performance, but it did not arouse his interest at all. Death is not scary. The real scary thing is to live a life worse than death. I will let you experience this feeling. Yi Xian's voice was extremely calm, but the golden-haired man's expression changed greatly. He knew that Yi Xian's means were extremely cruel, and he was afraid that his end would be extremely miserable. Thinking of this situation, the golden-haired man was also a ruthless person. He wanted to kill himself by biting his tongue, so as to avoid being tortured cruelly by Yi Xian. Crack! But before the golden-haired man could do anything, Yi Xian sneered and directly dislocated his chin. His voice was vicious as he said, Want to kill yourself? You are really naive. Fatso Huang, break his limbs and bring him back to the Wu, an agency for interrogation. Remember, no matter what kind of torture you use, you can't let him die. As Yi Xian threw the golden-haired man to Fatso Huang showed a ferocious smile and quickly left with the golden-haired man. Mr. Yi Xian, what should we do with this man? Tian Yu looked at Gu Dingtian coldly and was asking for Yi Xian's opinion. Break his limbs and put him in the warden's office until the machete god comes to pick him up. Yi Xian coldly said. He turned around and walked towards the outside world. Tian Yu and the others laughed sinisterly as they slowly walked towards Gu Dingtian. Gu Dingtian fell to the ground like mud and even pleaded with Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had gone far away. How could he care about Gu Dingtian's pleading? In the endless wilderness, the roars of beasts shook the sky. A figure covered in blood was fleeing in the wilderness. This person had a resolute face, and his cheek seemed to have been cut by a knife. He held a cold long saber in his hand and was covered by a terrible Gangqi shield. However, blood kept flowing out of the corners of his mouth, which proved that he had suffered a great injury. Howl! There was a 30-meter-long blood-red wolf that was emitting a terrifying bloody aura. Behind it were tens of thousands of blood-red wolves. The howls of the wolves were deafening in this wilderness. The sky-piercing evil aura rippled in all directions, causing people to feel a sense of terror just by looking at it. Ba Dao, the fifth master in the world 100 years ago, was respected by the world as the heavenly machete god. It was such a revered figure that was currently being chased and intercepted by the blood-red wolves. I can't die. I can't die. The capital. As long as I return to the capital, I will definitely survive the interception of the Xia's technological weapons. Ba Dao trembled and roared. The Gangqi around him was surging violently. Ba Dao was a very proud person. He was the fifth master in the world 100 years ago. After 100 years, he broke through the primordial realm and stepped into the legendary Earth God Immortal realm. His lifespan had reached 300 years, which made it possible for him to pursue the legendary way of immortality. He didn't want to die. He really didn't want to die. However, it was also because of his arrogance and pride that he had been looking for strange beasts to kill. Finally, he encountered a blood-red wolf in the northern prairie. He wanted to kill it to practice his cultivation method. However, when he really fought with the blood-red wolf, an extremely terrible fact was placed in front of him. In just 3 rounds, he was severely injured by the blood-red wolf. If he hadn't forcefully exhausted his blood qi and risked his life to escape from the northern prairie, he would have died in the wolf's mouth. What made Ba Dao feel the most despair was that the blood-red wolf didn't let him go. It even gathered tens of thousands of strange beasts to chase after him. It was also because of Ba Dao's escape that all the towns he passed by were devoured and slaughtered by tens of thousands of blood wolves. This made him feel ashamed, but he was powerless to stop it from happening. Escape. Survive. Ba Dao only had these 2 thoughts in his mind. The capital. The world was in an uproar and it angered the public. When the Martial Dao Heavenly Province was labeled as a traitor and a large number of warriors were arrested by the Martial Security Department, the entire capital was in an uproar. It wasn't just the capital. The news was broadcasted all over the country. Public opinion was incessant on the internet and it was constantly being spread throughout the country. When all the spearheads were pointed at Yi Xian, all sorts of curses were heard. There was no other reason. The Martial Dao Heavenly Province was founded by the Absolute Heaven Saber God. Furthermore, the Absolute Heaven Saber God had gone to various places to kill strange beasts. He was a person revered by the world. However, the Martial Security Department actually dared to slander the Martial Dao Heavenly Province. How could the world not be angry? Yi Xian. How could a person without any battle achievements or contributions to China be compared to the Absolute Heaven Saber God? On the internet, the news, and various large forums, there were all kinds of comments attacking Yi Xian. This kind of situation couldn't be controlled at all. It also caused Yi Xian to be completely embroiled in a storm of public opinion. Chapter 126. He was the target of public criticism and condemnation. The entire country was condemning Yi Xian. Some people even wrote a petition to the Supreme Court to accuse Yi Xian of abusing his power. Unfortunately, a large number of petitions were ignored. The officials of the Great Xia did not make any statement. However, the matter was spreading and the upper echelons of the Great Xia were at a loss as to how to deal with this matter. When the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace found out that Gu Dingtian had been imprisoned, many martial artists had died at the hands of Yi Xian, and the Martial Security Department had put on the hat of a traitor to the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace. This completely caused the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace to riot and issue a statement to the world. The statement was as follows. The Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture helped the people of the Great Xia fend off the terrifying beasts, but now the Great Xia is treating them as traitors. From now on, the Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture will no longer help the people of the Great Xia fend off the attacks of the beasts until the Great Xia gives a reasonable explanation. When this statement was released, it was like adding fuel to the fire, making the world unable to sit still. In this chaotic world, how fragile were the lives of mortals? If the Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture were to abandon them, it would undoubtedly make things worse for the mortals. This matter also alarmed the major forces of the Great Xia. Even the military of the Great Xia began to condemn Yi Xian. In this storm of public opinion, Yi Xian was reviled by the people of the world and had already aroused public anger. However, the broadcast of the news completely diverted the attention of the world. The news reported. Beishan City was massacred by the beasts, Qingshui Town suffered countless casualties, Great River Village was littered with corpses, and tens of thousands of blood wolves were killed wherever they went. Tens of thousands of miles of land were filled with bones and corpses, and dark red blood stained the ground. When these photos appeared on the internet, it immediately caused great fear in the world. What was even more frightening was that tens of thousands of blood wolves were rushing towards the capital city. They would probably arrive in less than 3 days. The entire capital city was under martial law. A large number of fully armed soldiers were patrolling the entire city. The citizens of the capital city were even more anxious. They were secretly praying in their hearts, hoping to survive this disaster. In the dark water prison at the headquarters of the Martial Dao Heavenly Prefecture, Yi Xian was dressed in black and his gray hair was draped behind his head. He leaned lazily on the chair, giving off a drowsy feeling. Yi Xian, kill me if you're a man. In the depths of the water prison, a golden-haired man with disheveled hair was bound by 2 iron chains. Below his knees, he was submerged in a large amount of dirty water. His 4 limbs were broken, and his body was bathed in blood. His twisted and malevolent face was like an evil spirit that had crawled out from hell. It caused people to feel extreme fear when they looked at him. Unfortunately, this scene did not move Yi Xian at all. Instead, he looked at the blonde man indifferently as if he was looking at a clown. Sir, this guy is too stubborn. No matter what kind of torture we used, he would not say a word. Even the latest psychedelic drug could not make him tell us where their headquarters are. Fatso Huang said with an ashamed expression. After all, I've been trained. It's understandable that you couldn't interrogate him. Yi Xian stretched his body lazily. His voice was very calm. Sir, I still have 2 ways to make him talk. Fatso Huang was afraid that Yi Xian would be dissatisfied and hurriedly asked. However, the sinister look on his face was extremely strong. What ways? Yi Xian smiled. The first way, I will create a pit of 10,000 snakes and put all kinds of poisonous snakes in the pit. After giving him the antidote, I will throw him into the pit and let him suffer the pain of being bitten by 10,000 snakes. However, I will definitely not take his life. The second way is actually what this subordinate is best at. Before I followed you, I was a surgeon and was very familiar with the human body. I can imitate the ancient punishment of death by 1,000 cuts. I will wrap a fishing net around this person and cut every hole in the net. Therefore, it is also known as fish scale cutting. I can cut a total of 3,600 times. Even if he has a will made of steel, he will still have to say everything he knows. As Fatso Huang spoke sinisterly, Yi Xian looked deeply at this person. Even he felt a sense of fear when he heard these 2 vicious punishments. I really didn't misjudge you. You are really vicious. Yi Xian said with a strange expression. The conversation between the two was naturally heard by the blonde man. This also made his body tremble. He struggled madly in the water prison. His eyes were already wide open. He was clearly frightened by Fatso's sinister methods. Yi Xian. I beg of you. Kill me. Kill me. The blonde man trembled and begged for death. He had never thought that death would be such a happy thing in his life. So you also know fear? Yi Xian laughed softly. He then turned to look at Fatso Huang and said, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. I'm not so bored as to torture people for fun. Besides, I have my own ways to find out everything I want." Buzz. Suddenly, a bloody light rose from Yi Xian's body. His eyes spun strangely, causing the blonde man in the depths of the water prison to stare blankly, as if he had lost his soul. Soul-snatching technique. This technique was extremely vicious. Not only could it read the blonde man's memories, but it would also destroy the soul of the person who was read. They wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. A large amount of memory fragments surged into Yi Xian's mind. After a minute, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. He had already understood what kind of power was behind the blonde man. It was also at this time that the blonde man's soul was destroyed. However, he had a peaceful smile on his face. Clearly, this kind of death was a kind of happiness for him. Ta ta ta. A series of footsteps came. Tian Yu quickly came before Yi Xian and bowed. "Mr. Yi, someone claims to be an old friend of yours and wishes to see you." "An old friend?" Hearing Tian Yu's words, Yi Xian frowned. He didn't have any old friends in the capital. Other than Qinglong and Shueji, there were only Xia Qingzhu and the Yi family. When did he have any old friends? Bring me to have a look. Under Tian Yu's lead, Yi Xian slowly walked towards the outside. Wuan Agency, meeting room. A graceful woman sat in the room. She wore a red dress that was as dazzling as a ball of flame. This woman's features were picturesque. Her delicate brows gave off a breathtaking feeling. "It's you." As Yi Xian walked into the meeting room, when she saw the woman's appearance, she was slightly startled, then returned to normal. "Mr. Yi, it's been a year since we parted in Jiangnan. Wan greets you." Gu Wan smiled sweetly and bowed to Yi Xian. Gu Wan was the person in charge of Jiangnan's dazzling auction house. Back then, Yi Xian had purchased jade from this woman. He had even given her a Yun spirit pill to auction. If Gu Wan hadn't appeared before him, Yi Xian might have already forgotten about this woman. Moreover, Yi Xian didn't think that he had anything to do with this woman. What was Gu Wan's purpose in coming to see him? Chapter 127. Gu Wan. All of a sudden, a ray of light flashed through Yi Xian's mind. A trace of understanding flashed through his eyes, as if he'd guessed the purpose of Gu Wan's visit. "How are you related to Gu Dingtian?" Yi Xian asked calmly. Gu Wan's face turned bitter. She bit her lips and said, "Gu Dingtian is my father. I came here to ask you to spare my father's life. Save her father." These two simple words revealed her purpose. Yi Xian smiled contemptuously and said, "Gu Dingtian plotted a rebellion, which is a serious crime. He will be sentenced to death soon. Although you and I have met once, I can't save him." Gu Wan's face did not change, as if she had already guessed this result. She hesitated for a while, then showed a charming smile and walked towards Yi Xian. Her eyes were like limpid autumn water, with a seductive look. "Mr. Yi, who doesn't know that you have the final say in the Wu and department? As long as you say the word, my father will be released from the sea of suffering. As long as you can help me this time, I will be at your disposal." Gu Wan's seductive appearance was overflowing, and a hint of redness appeared on her exquisite face. When she lightly spat out her cherry lips, the fragrance of orchids assaulted her face. Her long red dress also fell off at this moment, and her beautiful body, which was carved like ivory, was completely revealed in front of Yi Xian. Was Gu Wan beautiful? She was beautiful, extremely beautiful. She was a kind of seductive beauty. Regardless of her appearance, temperament, or her curvaceous figure, she gave people a feeling that she could steal one's soul. As long as a man saw this scene, he would probably turn into a beast and do something impulsive. Gu Wan was very confident in herself. She believed that no man could resist her temptation, even Yi Xian was no exception. Yi Xian's face was very calm. When he opened and closed his eyes, they were as deep as an ancient pool. He looked at Gu Wan indifferently, and no one knew what he was thinking. A honey trap. Yi Xian smiled and stroked Gu Wan's rosy cheeks with one hand, which made the woman blush even more. When her cherry lips parted, she moaned shamefully, and her beautiful body trembled slightly, giving people a very ambiguous feeling. Mr. Yi, let Wan serve you, okay? Gu Wan raised her jade-like arms and wrapped them around Yi Xian's body. When she closed her eyes slightly, she looked very seductive, as if she was at his mercy, giving people a sense of temptation. Are you a virgin? Suddenly. While Gu Wan was waiting for Yi Xian to pluck her, Yi Xian's voice was slightly indifferent, which made Gu Wan's face slightly changed. She opened her eyes and looked at Yi Xian. When Gu Wan saw the contemptuous smile on Yi Xian's face, she stopped breathing and became a little flustered. She then forced a smile and said, Mr. Yi, is this important? Gu Wan could not be blamed for being flustered. After all, she was not a virgin and had already been with many men. Moreover, she had a great secret. Gu Dingtian could become the deputy palace master of the martial Dao Heavenly Palace because she had already given herself to the absolute Heaven Blade God. Otherwise, how could Gu Dingtian, a mere grandmaster warrior, be the deputy palace master of the martial Dao Heavenly Palace? Slap! All of a sudden, a resounding slap sounded out. A 5-fingered red mark appeared on Gu Wan's face, and her delicate body was sent flying. Blood couldn't stop flowing out from the corner of her mouth, and she was completely stunned. She never thought that Yi Xian would actually make a move against her. At this moment, Yi Xian straightened his clothes as an expression of extreme disgust appeared on his face. He coldly looked at Gu Wan and said, not to mention that you're a withered flower, even if you're a virgin, do you think you're worthy of me? Yi Xian smiled contemptuously and walked slowly toward Gu Wan. He looked down at her and said in a cold voice, it's easy to save your father. Give me all the Gu family's property, and I will naturally spare his life. Now, you can get out of here. After saying that, Yi Xian turned and walked out of the meeting room. He did not even want to look at Gu Wan's beautiful body. Yi Xian, stop right there. Without waiting for Yi Xian to leave, Gu Wan spoke out in embarrassment and indignation. She didn't care about her naked body and quickly blocked Yi Xian's path. Gu Wan had never been humiliated like this since she was a child. But she never thought that she would be humiliated like this by Yi Xian today. How could she endure this? Yi Xian, I'm warning you. The martial Heavenly Palace is already pressuring the Xia Kingdom. If you don't release my father, the martial Heavenly Palace will no longer protect the people of the Xia Kingdom. Moreover, it's not just the martial Heavenly Palace. All the major powers are paying attention to this matter. The military of the Xia Kingdom is also extremely dissatisfied with you. Even if you have someone backing you, the people of the Xia Kingdom are cursing you. You have already become a sinner of the Xia Kingdom. It won't be long before the upper echelons of the Xia Kingdom interfere in this matter even if you don't release him. Gu Wan shouted angrily, her words carrying a great threat. Yi Xian smiled. He really smiled, but it was an extremely cold smile. Yi Xian, I can guarantee you that as long as you release my father, the martial Heavenly Palace will definitely let bygones be bygones. Gu Wan's tone softened, hoping that Yi Xian would understand the situation he was in. You're really ignorant. Yi Xian laughed coldly as a killing intent flashed through his eyes. When Gu Wan saw Yi Xian's smile, her face changed. A feeling of impending doom surged towards her, and she could not help but take a step back. You, what are you doing? Gu Wan asked in a trembling voice. Buzz. Taking a step forward, the air exploded. Under Gu Wan's horrified gaze, Yi Xian's face was cold as he gripped her neck with one hand and lifted her into the air. Crack. Tightening his fingers, he broke her neck. This was Yi Xian's method. Gu Wan's eyes lost focus as large amounts of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. To think that she would die from having her neck broken by Yi Xian. Bang! Yi Xian threw the woman's body on the ground as if he was throwing away garbage. He said in a cold voice, I hate it when people threaten me. You can die now. Fatso Huang. Yes, my lord. Fatso Huang quietly appeared behind Yi Xian, waiting for Yi Xian's orders. Throw this woman out and kill Gu Dingtian for me. Let the father and daughter go to hell together. Also, tell Tianyu to use the name of the Martial Security Department to announce to the public that anyone who befriends the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace is going against me, Yi Xian, and will be punished for treason. As for the Gu family, it's time for your death god guards to do something. Go and wipe them out. Remember, don't leave anyone alive. Yes, sir. Fatso Huang smiled grimly and took the order. Looking at Fatso Huang's back, Yi Xian murmured coldly, if I don't teach you a lesson, it seems that you really think that I, Yi Xian, am easy to bully. Chapter 128. No one could go against Yi Xian's will. This had already become the consensus of the Martial Security Bureau. According to Yi Xian's instructions, the Martial Security Bureau released a statement to the public. However, the statement was not as straightforward as Yi Xian's. It was clearly more tactful, but the content made the world angry and helpless. The Martial Dao Heavenly Palace was convicted of treason. Anyone who colluded with them would be punished for treason. As for the Gu family, they were all imprisoned in the prison and would be sentenced at a later date. Yi Xian's domineering will directly appeared on all the major forums and networks. However, because of the attack of the blood wolf beast, this matter was quickly ignored by the world. At this moment, the eyes of the world were focused on these terrifying beasts. A waning moon hung in the sky. In the capital, in a remote courtyard house, when night fell, a big shot of Xia Kingdom, accompanied by guards, quietly entered this courtyard house. After an entire night, when the sun rose from the east, this big shot walked out of the courtyard house. In the courtyard, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. A breeze blew, causing his hair to flutter in the wind. Yi Xian's eyes drifted as if he was deep in thought. No one knew what he was thinking. Sir, you have to consider this matter carefully. Fatso Huang reminded in a low voice. Fatso Huang, do you know why no matter what I do, I can obtain the support of the upper echelons of China? Yi Xian said softly. This. Fatso Huang didn't know how to answer Yi Xian's question. In fact, he also had a lot of questions in his heart. Yi Xian was only a guest elder, but why did the upper echelons of China stand firmly on his side in the matter of the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace? This subordinate is slow-witted. Sir, please enlighten me. Fatso Huang said respectfully. Because in the eyes of the upper echelons of China, I, Yi Xian, am the only person who can protect China. Yi Xian said with a self-deprecating smile. Ah. Upon receiving this answer, Fatso Huang cried out in surprise. He looked at Yi Xian with a strange look in his eyes. This was because he did not understand what ability his master had to make the upper echelons of China think so highly of him. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't explain too much. He didn't want to tell Fatso Huang that he was actually a cultivator, and a crossing calamity stage cultivator at that. There was no need for him to know about this. Sir, you have to understand that there are over 10,000 exotic beasts attacking this time. There has never been such a huge beast tide in the world. If something happens to you, then... Fatso Huang wanted to say something but stopped himself. However, the worry on his face was obvious. Ha! Exotic beasts? Yi Xian's eyes flickered as the blood-colored memories replayed in his mind. Those 4 years of blood-soaked fighting, of struggling between life and death. No one knew what he had experienced, but the number of exotic beasts that had died at his hands numbered in the tens of millions. 3 days later, in the suburbs of Jingdu, heavy tanks were lined up in a row. A large number of high-tech weapons were laid across the ground. The black mass of soldiers was endless. Every one of them was fully armed and held heavy machine guns in their hands. They stood there quietly with their weapons resting on their backs. It wasn't just these soldiers. A large number of ancient martial ability users were holding weapons and releasing a sharp aura around them. They were all waiting for the blood wolf tide to attack. Jingdu TV station, this is Jingdu TV station. The scene we are seeing now is the northern suburbs of Jingdu. According to the satellite radar, in half an hour, these terrifying beasts will invade Jingdu. This is Qingning TV station. Our soldiers of China are united. We will definitely survive this disaster. The hosts of the major TV stations were nervously reporting the news. Under the cameras of the major TV stations, the scene of the suburbs of Jingdu appeared in the eyes of the people of China. At this moment, some of the people of China were gathered in front of the TV, while others were watching the live broadcast on the internet. However, without exception, everyone was secretly praying that this beast tide would pass safely. In a southern city, in an ordinary person's house. Look, look. What did I say? The martial Tao heavenly abode really didn't send anyone to resist this beast tide. A middle-aged bald man stared at the scene on the TV. His voice was extremely irritable. Hubby, forget it. Even without the martial Tao heavenly abode, our soldiers will definitely be able to destroy these beasts. His wife gently consoled him. Stupid. What does a woman like you know? If the absolute heaven blade god can lead the martial Tao heavenly abode to resist this beast tide, it will increase our chances of winning. It's all that despicable Yi Xian's fault. If he hadn't slandered the martial Tao heavenly abode, this wouldn't have happened. The middle-aged bald man cursed, appearing extremely angry. In a slightly cold bar in a northern city, more than 10 young men and women were drinking, but their eyes were all focused on the TV. That damned Yi Xian. Whether or not Jingdu can survive this beast tide, I will definitely condemn him on the internet. That's right. Look, where's this bastard in this group of warriors? This Yi Xian is an existence that brings disaster to the country and the people. When I return to school, I will definitely gather all of our classmates and write a letter to the Supreme Court to accuse him of abusing his authority. These scenes continued to happen in every city. The curses and resentment of the citizens of China also rang out everywhere. Yi Xian's image had been completely positioned as an existence that brought disaster to the country and the people. Capital, northern suburbs. Although it was summer, neither the soldiers of China nor the ancient martial arts ability users felt the slightest bit of heat. This was because they knew that they were about to face cruel beasts. In a while, they would face a life and death battle. Ayo! The howl of a wolf shook the earth. A cloud of blood rose from the distant horizon. The terrifying howl of the wolf and the bloody light that soared into the sky were like a blood-colored meteor that wanted to destroy this world. Warriors of China. A middle-aged general with a dignified and solemn expression streaked across the sky with a military knife, emitting a cold light. Behind you are the citizens of China. They are not only our family, but also the people we need to protect. If the country is destroyed, the family will be destroyed. If the family is destroyed, the people will no longer be around. Fight for survival, fight for the people of China. The middle-aged general roared hot-bloodedly. Fight for survival, fight for the people of China. The mountains roared and the seas roared. The world was filled with killing intent. Endless roars echoed in all directions. It was also at this moment that the tanks on the ground aimed their cannons forward. Groups of bombers soared in the sky, ready to fire the missiles under their wings at any time. A large number of high-tech weapons were also activated at this moment. The black mass of soldiers held heavy machine guns and were already pressing the triggers. A large number of ancient martial arts ability users released their sharp auras, ready to fight the beast tide at any time. Get ready. The middle-aged general raised his military knife. When his military knife fell, it was time to fire at the tens of thousands of blood wolves. Chapter 129. Wait, what's that? Is that a person? Saber God. At this critical moment, the battle was about to begin. However, many ancient martial artists cried out in alarm. The middle-aged general was stunned as he looked ahead. A person was running in a sorry state, his entire body bathed in blood. The aura around his body was extremely weak, as if it would shatter at any moment. Behind this person, tens of thousands of blood wolves were howling and roaring, madly chasing after him. I'm the absolute saber god. Don't fire. Ba Dao's face was pale as he roared. When he saw the tens of thousands of soldiers in front of him, joy appeared in his eyes. He quickly ran toward them. Don't fire. He's really saber god. A martial artist shouted. No, if we don't fire now, we'll all die when the beast horde gets closer, a major general refuted. His face was extremely pale. But saber god is right in front of us. If we fire now, he'll die too, a martial artist argued. He was extremely stupid and did not understand the seriousness of the situation. General, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and fire. Do you want to wait until the beast horde destroys capital city? The major general roared. It was no wonder that the major general was so anxious. The only thing they could use to fight against the exotic beasts was their high-tech weapons. If they waited for tens of thousands of blood wolves to get closer, it would be too late to activate them. These high-tech weapons were all long-range attacks. If they exploded at close range, they would be able to deal heavy damage to the beast horde. However, they would also die under the high-tech weapons. All troops, listen up. The middle-aged general had already seen the seriousness of the situation. He had no choice but to sacrifice Ba Dao. This was the best choice. How dare you? All of a sudden, several tens of cultivators stepped out from the crowd and stood in front of the various high-tech weapons. This caused the middle-aged general's countenance to change, and his entire body trembled in anger. You idiots! The middle-aged general roared angrily, ignore them and open fire. What a pity! The opportunity was fleeting. After a short delay, the beast horde was less than a kilometer away from capital city. It was also at this moment that Ba Dao crossed the sky and finally arrived at the human camp. General, the range is too short. We can't fire. Reporting to the general, the A-02 annihilation missile cannot be launched. If it is launched now, you will also be in the center of the explosion. A large number of reports came in, causing the middle-aged general's face to turn ashen. He glared hatefully at Ba Dao, but he didn't have the time to pay attention to him. Activate the second emergency plan. As the middle-aged general roared, the tens of thousands of soldiers turned pale, but they still held their heavy machine guns and aimed at the beast tide that was charging toward them. However, their backs were already drenched in cold sweat. Fire! Da-da-da! Flames and smoke filled the sky. When the tens of thousands of soldiers pulled the triggers, the black muzzles shot out tens of thousands of tongues of fire. The terrifying power seemed to want to tear the sky apart. Roar! The blood wolf howled into the sky. Vicious energy rushed into the heavens. An extremely terrifying scene appeared. The blood-red heavenly wolf's body, which was 100 feet tall, swelled up at a terrifying speed. It only stopped when it was 1,000 feet tall. The blood-red light on its body covered the sky, and when it roared at the sky, an incredibly terrifying energy gushed out of its mouth. Rumble. The blood-red light filled the sky, and the ground shook. Tens of thousands of tongues of fire were turned into ashes under the roar of the blood-red heavenly wolf. However, this wasn't the end. The terrifying energy destroyed everything in its path, instantly turning the tanks on the ground into scrap metal. The remaining energy shockwaves caused tens of thousands of soldiers to fall to the ground. Roar! The 100-foot-tall heavenly wolf flew across the sky. The blood-red light around its body rippled as it roared at the sky. Its terrifying power filled the sky and earth, causing people to feel extremely terrified. Who could resist its monstrous power? Who dared to resist it? At this moment, the hosts of the major television stations screamed. Many cameras shook violently, but they still broadcast the scene in front of them. This allowed the people of the Xia Kingdom to watch this terrifying scene through their televisions. Roar! Tens of thousands of blood wolves rushed over. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived in front of the tens of thousands of soldiers. The ferocious beast's eyes were filled with blood, and its terrifying claws seemed to want to tear apart all the humans in front of it. Kill! The middle-aged general's eyes were filled with despair. However, he still held the military knife in his hand and led the soldiers behind him to fight against the blood wolves. Under his lead, the soldiers of the Xia Kingdom knew that there was no way out. They could only fight with their backs against the wall because behind them were all the people of the capital city. Roar! Da-da-da! The howls of the wolves and the sounds of gunfire were completely intertwined at this moment. The vast land was scorched earth. Blood splattered everywhere, and miserable howls could be heard. The terrifying howls of the wolves were cruel and ferocious. One by one, the soldiers fell into a pool of blood and gradually turned into cold corpses. They continued to fight against the strange beasts, but they were only mortals. How could they be a match for the blood wolves? Suddenly, a large number of cries came from the capital city. Thousands of people were rushing towards the battlefield. The sorrowful cries came from their mouths. This was because among the soldiers fighting on the battlefield, some were their fathers, some were their children, and some were their loved ones. On the battlefield, an ordinary soldier, about 18 or 19 years old. His face was still young and immature. He looked like a teenager. His ribs were broken and he crawled in a pool of blood with great difficulty. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth uncontrollably. It was obvious that he had suffered unimaginable injuries in this battle with the strange beasts. My son. There was a woman with white hair and tears on her wrinkled face. She did not care about the slaughter on the battlefield at all. She staggered towards the young man until she reached him and hugged him tightly in her arms. Tears flowed out of her eyes uncontrollably. Roar! A blood wolf howled ferociously. Its blood-red eyes shone with a light that seemed to choose a person to devour. It was approaching the mother and son with a low growl. Mom, hurry up and leave. The teenager trembled as large amounts of blood flowed from his mouth. He looked at his mother with teary eyes. His trembling arms constantly supported himself on the ground as he tried to stand up. Crack! The sound of bones cracking came from the teenager's broken arms. In the end, he could not stand up and fell into his mother's arms. I can't die. I have to protect my family. The teenager trembled as he growled. He gripped a military knife tightly in his hand and protected his mother behind him. However, his eyes were filled with despair. Roar! The blood wolf soared into the air. Its sharp claws emitted the light of death as if it would tear the teenager apart in the next moment. The teenager's eyes were mournful. He raised the military knife in his hand and was ready to fight to the death. All of a sudden, at this critical moment, a benevolent figure blocked in front of him. A terrifying sharp claw pierced through the person's chest. Blood spurted out and dyed the youth's face blood red. It was a tragic sight. Drip, drip, drip. Blood kept dripping from the teenager's face to the ground. He stared blankly at his mother's body that had collapsed in front of him. It was as if she had lost her soul. The woman's body was cold, but her face was filled with serenity after death. Looking at this scene, the teenager's military knife fell to the ground. A line of blood tears slowly flowed from his eyes. His eyes drifted and blurry memories of the past kept flashing in his mind. Chapter 130. When he was 10 years old. Lin Air, you have to remember that when you grow up, you have to protect your country and be a man of indomitable spirit. Mom, you're really annoying. How many times have you told me that I'm going out to play? When he was 18 years old, in front of the train station, he was wearing a military uniform with a red flower on his chest. Lin Air, from today onwards, you will enter the army. No matter what difficulties you encounter in the future, you have to remember that a soldier's duty is to protect your country. His mother, whose hair was white, was earnestly teaching him in front of the train station. All right, don't nag anymore. I'm leaving now. The young man waved his hand and stepped on the train to the military camp. As the train rumbled and started, the young man officially became a soldier and left his hometown and his mother's side. The young man's thoughts turned. His eyes were already blurred by tears. He looked at his mother's cold body and said, "Mom, your son has never let you down. Even if I bleed to the last drop of my blood, I will be a hero to protect my country. You can rest in peace in the underworld." Kill. The young man's broken body exploded with amazing willpower. He picked up the military knife on the ground and rushed towards the blood wolf with a crazy face. Awoo. The young man's action completely enraged the blood wolf and it directly pounced on him. The young man didn't try to dodge. He knew that he couldn't dodge, but the crazed look in his eyes was enough to shock anyone who looked at him. Puff. The blood wolf's claws pierced through the young man's chest. However, the young man did not feel any pain. The military knife in his hand stabbed towards the blood wolf's heart as if he had gone crazy, causing the blood wolf to let out a shrill howl. After a full 10 breaths of time, the blood wolf's heart was destroyed and it finally died under the young man's knife. The young man's cold body fell to the ground. However, his face was extremely peaceful after death. It was as if he was telling the world that he had fulfilled his promise to his mother and was a true hero. Such a scene was constantly playing out in various places. Dad. A middle-aged soldier died tragically in the mouth of the blood wolf. In the distance, a young girl cried loudly. Her cries were so loud that it made people feel as if their liver and intestines were about to break. Husband. There was a young soldier who had just gotten married. His wife's eyes were filled with tears as she hugged his cold body tightly. She was also buried in the wolf's mouth. Blood wolves howled to the sky, and humans cried out in grief. This was a war between humans and exotic beasts. It was a merciless slaughter that humans were unable to withstand at all. Blood dyed the ground red, and the ice-cold corpse was a ghastly sight. When these scenes were broadcast live on television to the citizens of Xia country, they cried in front of their televisions. There was only despair in their eyes. On the battlefield, the middle-aged general was bathed in blood. He was protected by a large number of soldiers, but the endless blood wolves had already surrounded them. He turned around and stared at the retreating ancient martial ability users as he roared, "You damned bastards, do you want to be deserters?" With Ba Dao in the lead, shame appeared on everyone's faces. However, they knew that even if they went forward, they wouldn't be a match for these terrifying exotic beasts. Just the Wolf King alone was staring at them and could possibly annihilate them at any moment. At this moment, through the live broadcast, the citizens of Xia country were all watching this scene. When they saw the absolute heaven blade god that they revered continuously retreating, an earth-shattering wave of curses rang out across Xia country. What absolute heaven blade god? He's a bastard. This beast horde was obviously attracted by that bastard Ba Dao. He has to take full responsibility. It's useless to scold him now. These exotic beasts are too terrifying. Let's just pray that the citizens of Jingdu can escape this calamity. The entire Xia country was in chaos at this moment. Cries of grief could be heard from all over the country. On the battlefield, the middle-aged general's eyes were mournful, and there was a hint of madness in them. He suddenly roared at the soldiers beside him, "Soldiers, are you afraid of death?" "No." A large number of soldiers roared mournfully. They had already guessed what the middle-aged general was going to do. "Ha, good. As expected of my soldiers. Today, I'll let these ancient martial ability users die with us. It can be considered as protecting the citizens of Jingdu." The middle-aged general laughed maniacally. He picked up the communication device in his hand and issued a crazy order. "Launch the A-02 annihilation missile for Lao Tzu." A number of armed aircraft instantly received this order. This caused the pilots to tremble as they replied, "General, if you do this, you will die too. A soldier's duty is to obey orders. You only need to carry out orders." The middle-aged general roared loudly. This caused the pilots to look pained. However, they knew that this was the only way to eliminate the beast horde. "Launch the A-02 annihilation missile." A red button protruded from the cockpit. However, before the pilots could press the red button, a terrifying blood-red light streaked across the sky. A number of armed aircraft instantly exploded into balls of fire. A large number of aircraft wreckage fell to the ground. Awoo! The blood-red sky wolf's 100-foot-long beast body stretched across the void. A terrifying blood-red light bloomed around its body. When its eyes opened and closed, a cruel and violent look flashed across them. "Foolish humans. Today, all of you will become my food." The void shook and the heavens and earth echoed. When the blood-red sky wolf spoke in human language, the world quietly quieted down. No one would have thought that this blood-red sky wolf would have spiritual intelligence that was not inferior to a human's. Everything was quiet. The heavens and earth were silent. Despair spread. The people were panicking because they had discovered an extremely terrifying thing. Since the blood-red sky wolf could speak in human language, it obviously had intelligence that was not inferior to a human's. Based on this, did the beasts that wreaked havoc all over the world also have their own spiritual intelligence? When humans were no longer the leader of all creatures and the beasts had intelligence, where would the future of humans lie? Boys, enjoy this blood-red feast to your heart's content. The blood-red sky wolf howled at the sky. The blood-red light around its body covered the sky and earth. The tens of thousands of blood-red wolves howled in excitement. They rushed towards the humans in front of them with bloodthirsty eyes. Dong! 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 Suddenly, like the beating of the war drums of slaughter, like the 9 heavens and the rivers of stars in reverse, the wind and clouds in this area changed, and it actually gradually dimmed. An extremely oppressive atmosphere spread in all directions, and the white clouds in the sky turned the color of blood, and there was even more terrifying lightning wreaking havoc in the blood clouds. Rumble! The blood-red lightning streaked across the sky. The terrifying sound of thunder seemed to make the world tremble. Above the capital city, Tongtian's blood-red light soared into the sky. A figure stepped on the sky. His gray hair fluttered in the wind. His black ancient robe rustled. With every step he took, the void beneath his feet trembled. Terrifying ripples spread in all directions. It made people feel a great sense of awe when they looked at him. Like a divine king descending to the mortal world, like a god of the underworld descending. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. He stood proudly between the heavens and earth. However, When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only a ruthless and indifferent look. At the same time, when this scene was broadcast live on television to the people of the Xia Kingdom, it made them speechless. They widened their eyes and did not dare to look away. Chapter 131. Who is he? Yi Xian. He's Yi Xian. I've seen his photo on a forum before. Everyone was in an uproar. Everyone had a complicated look on their faces. They had never expected that Yi Xian, whom they had cursed for days, would appear at such a critical moment when the heavenly blade god was retreating. On the battlefield, tens of thousands of blood-red wolves stopped in their tracks. Their bodies were trembling. At that moment, all of them were prostrating on the ground as if they had seen an extremely terrifying existence. In the void, the blood-red wolf's pupils constricted. It stared at the figure in the distant sky. The terrifying ferocious aura around it was faintly showing signs of dissipating. Lord Heavenly Sovereign. The blood-red wolf growled. However, its language was not human language. It was a language unique to the Blood Sea battlefield. Other than Yi Xian, no one else could understand it. Then, a scene that shocked the world appeared. The ferocious beast horde was slowly retreating. The blood-red wolf was trembling in the void. Its thick limbs were trembling uncontrollably. When this scene appeared in front of everyone, an extremely strange atmosphere spread throughout the Xia Kingdom. Anyone who was not an idiot could see that the blood-red wolf and the beast horde were clearly afraid of Yi Xian. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, the people of the Xia Kingdom would not have believed it. Greetings, Lord Heavenly Sovereign. The blood-red wolf knew that it could not escape. It also deeply understood how terrifying the person it was facing was. The undying Heavenly Sovereign was the supreme figure in the Blood Sea. More than 10 million creatures had died in his hands. The blood-red wolf was only an extremely weak existence in the Blood Sea battlefield. How could it dare to resist such a terrifying existence? Tens of thousands of blood wolves prostrated themselves on the ground. When this scene appeared in the eyes of the world, it immediately caused a huge uproar. How is this possible? Ba Dao exclaimed in shock. He's Mr. Yi. The middle-aged general said excitedly. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the void. He looked indifferently at the blood-red wolf in front of him. An extremely obscure language came out of his mouth. How do you want to die? Emotionless six desires, heartless heaven and earth, this was the attitude of the undying Heavenly Lord. It also made the blood-colored Heavenly Wolf tremble slightly. It said, Heavenly Lord, please spare my life. I was only leading my men to hide in the northern prairie. It was a human who disturbed our peace, so I chased him for 10,000 miles until here. Obviously, the blood-red wolf was talking about Ba Dao. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't give the blood-red wolf a chance to explain. His eyes were cold and emotionless. Since you're here, there's no need for you to leave. I can use the blood qi in your bodies to strengthen my cultivation. When Yi Xian's voice fell, the blood-red wolf's breath froze. Others might not know Yi Xian's temperament, but it was a creature from the Blood Sea battlefield. How could it not know about Yi Xian's terrifying methods? Roar! The heavenly wolf's aura changed drastically. Surging blood light covered its entire body as it roared toward the sky. At this point, even if it begged for mercy, it would be useless. This caused a tyrannical intent to rise in its heart. Flee! Yes, flee! Although the blood-red wolf was a mutated beast, it didn't lack the intelligence of a human. It knew that it was no match for Yi Xian, so why would it risk its life to fight Yi Xian? The void trembled and the air exploded. The blood-red wolf stepped on the void and turned into a streak of blood light, fleeing into the distance in a sorry state. It didn't even look at its subordinates. Do you think you can escape? A cruel smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. His sword fingers streaked across the sky, and a terrifying blood light condensed in the void. A 300-meter-long blood-red celestial sword formed in the sky. Slash! It was like a thunderclap from the 9 heavens. When Yi Xian's sword fingers streaked across the void, the blood-red celestial sword shot out. It seemed to break through the barrier of space and suddenly appeared above the blood-red wolf's head. Rumble! The celestial sword fell and killed everything. The terrifying blood-red celestial sword instantly cut the blood-red wolf in two. However, it wasn't over yet. Under the horrified gazes of the people, the blood-red celestial sword turned into sword chi that filled the sky and directly shredded the blood-red wolf into a large amount of blood mist. It was also at this moment that Yi Xian seemed to have turned into a blood-red vortex and devoured all the blood mist. Rumble! The blood-red light was misty and covered the sky. An extremely terrifying fluctuation rose around Yi Xian. His face alternated between red and pale. It was obvious that he was refining the majestic blood chi in his body. Huff! Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air, and there was an explosion in the void. How I miss this feeling. Yi Xian stretched out his arms and had an intoxicated look on his face. It was obvious that devouring the blood chi was extremely beneficial to his cultivation. It's not Yi Xian's habit to waste food that's delivered to my doorstep, Yi Xian muttered to himself. There was a hint of cruelty in his eyes as he looked at the blood-red wolf. Rumble! Yi Xian struck out with his palm and sword chi that filled the sky rained down as if it was raining cats and dogs. It showed the world what a true expert was like. Roar! Tens of thousands of blood-red wolves fled in all directions. They were howling miserably and no longer had the ferocity they had when they slaughtered humans. Under the merciless rain of blood, their bodies were pierced and turned into a large amount of blood chi that was absorbed by Yi Xian's body to increase his cultivation. Everything was silent and the world was silent. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps a minute, or perhaps an hour, when there were no longer any traces of the blood wolves on the ground, the surviving soldiers gradually woke up and let out cheers of joy. Below the sky, in the void, Yi Xian stepped down from the sky, causing the survivors to be in awe. As for the citizens of Xia who were watching the disaster live on television, they were even more emotional and did not know what to say. Yi Xian, since your cultivation is so high, why didn't you appear earlier and eliminate all these strange beasts? Instead, you let so many of our soldiers die in vain? Suddenly, an angry roar was heard. Ba Dao's face was flushed red as he questioned Yi Xian loudly. When Ba Dao said such harsh words, the survivors were stunned. Although they looked down on Ba Dao, what he said was the truth. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was cold and he had no intention of explaining. He only looked around indifferently and said in a calm voice, "This is a catastrophe for mankind. Whether you can survive it or not depends on you. Remember, I can help you once, but I might not be able to help you a second time." After saying this, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he directly looked at Ba Dao. This caused Ba Dao's expression to change, and all the hair on his body stood on end. His feet unconsciously retreated. You! What are you doing? Buzz! Before Ba Dao could react, Yi Xian waved his hand and instantly sucked Ba Dao in front of him. You little ant, how dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Yi Xian said eerily. Die! Bang! Before Ba Dao's horrified eyes, a blood-red light enveloped him. The absolute Sky Blade God did not even have time to scream before he exploded into a bloody mist. He no longer existed in this world. Good death! Someone clapped and cheered. Following that, a large number of voices echoed. Suddenly, before the soldiers could express their gratitude to Yi Xian's calm face suddenly turned cold. His eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Then, he looked eerily into the depths of the sky. When he took a step forward, he mysteriously disappeared from everyone's sight. Chapter 132. The world was in an uproar as discussions broke out. The beast tide had touched everyone's hearts. The soldiers who survived the battle could return home, and the dead would be listed as heroes for future generations to remember. The Supreme Court of the State of Xia determined that the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum was guilty of treason. Their leader, Ba Dao, had been executed, and the rest of the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum were all punished for treason. In an instant, the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum was cursed by everyone. Their branches across the country were closed down by the Hanging Mirror Department, and a large number of warriors left the Martial Dao Heavenly Sanctum. The 7 deputy sanctum heads seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. A transcendent power that had just risen had disappeared under the thunderous blow of the state of Xia. This also sounded the alarm for many other transcendent powers in the state of Xia. And this was not the end. The warriors and ability users who had retreated from the beast tide were all captured by the Martial Security Department and sentenced to death. When everything was over and the state of Xia was slightly more peaceful, everyone's attention was focused on one person. Yi Xian. It was a simple name, but it was well known by everyone. Without his appearance, perhaps the entire population of the capital would have been massacred by the beast tide. The public's opinion changed. The curses directed at Yi Xian turned into guilt. All the major forums on the internet and major television news channels issued apologies to Yi Xian. All the major ancient martial arts clans and transcendent powers stepped through the doors of the Yi family, wanting to invite Yi Xian to attend some events. They even lowered their statuses to the extreme. However, while they were searching for Yi Xian seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth, never appearing in front of the world again. The Martial Security Department, the Hanging Mirror Department, and the state of Xia's military were not the only forces looking for Yi Xian. Jixia College, the Monster Exterminating League. Even the overseas forces were investigating Yi Xian's whereabouts. However, to their disappointment, after 3 months, Yi Xian did not appear in the eyes of the world. The sky was high, the clouds were light, and the wind was howling. A streak of light tore through the clouds. The terrifying shockwave exploded, but it did not affect Yi Xian at all. His eyes were gloomy and cold, and his face alternated between red and pale. He was shooting towards the south at an unimaginable speed. Rumble. Thunder rumbled while the might of the heavens and the earth pressed down. In the depths of the vast sky, a strand of azure blue lightning was faintly discernible, and it seemed to be chasing after Yi Xian's figure without dispersing from the beginning until now. Heavenly thunder tribulation. For simple words, but they carried an extremely terrifying meaning. When Yi Xian devoured the qi and blood of tens of thousands of blood fiends and consolidated his cultivation at the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage, this was originally a trivial matter. However, under the throbbing of his heart, a sense of restlessness appeared in his heart. Yi Xian knew that his lightning tribulation had arrived. This was also the reason why he had left the capital so quickly. The crossing calamity stage, as the name implied, was a tribulation for immortal cultivators. In this stage, there were a total of 2 lightning tribulations. The first one was the human tribulation, which was the process of transforming a human into an immortal. Stepping into the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage would lead to the human tribulation. If one could pass it, one would become a half-immortal. If not, one would die and not even have the chance to be reincarnated. As for the later immortal tribulation, it was even more terrifying. It was the process of transforming a mortal into an immortal. Yi Xian was originally at the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. After refining the 6 Tao principles in Yama-Hell, he stepped into the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. The so-called human tribulation was about to arrive, and Yi Xian was well aware of it. After devouring the qi and blood of the blood fiends, he stabilized his cultivation at the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. This also made the heavens and the earth feel it and sent the first tribulation to him. Yi Xian was not afraid of the so-called human tribulation. With his mastery of the forbidden chapter of the immortal scripture, the so-called human tribulation was just a trivial matter in his eyes. What really worried Yi Xian was the inner demon tribulation. If the inner demon tribulation attacked him while he was fighting against the human tribulation, he would suffer an extremely cruel test. It was easy to pass the immortal tribulation, but it was difficult to escape from the human heart. These simple words were as heavy as a mountain. It also explained the rugged road of immortal cultivators. Immortal cultivators cultivated their fate and went against the heavens. They understood the heart of the heavens and the Tao of the heavens and the earth. They were not tainted by the mortal world and rarely touched by killing. This did not mean that they had no desires, but they were afraid of being tainted by the karma of killing and attracting the inner demon tribulation. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the inner demon tribulation was. As for Yi Xian's cultivation, it was obtained from devouring blood energy. It was unknown how many creatures had died in his hands, but his hands were already covered in blood. His body was filled with a vicious aura, and the resentment that those creatures emitted before they died continued to coil around his body. Yi Xian could be said to be a devil cultivator. Since ancient times, devil cultivators did not have a good ending. Most of them died in the inner demon tribulation. The boundless mountains were continuous and undulating. This was a desolate and uninhabited place. It was a primeval forest that had not been developed by humans. The vast vegetation was lush, and the sound of birds chirping and beasts roaring could be heard from time to time. It gave people a sense of horror. Under the sky, in the void, Yi Xian's expression changed. He knew that he could not go any further. The thunder calamity in the sky had locked onto him, and the boundless mountains below were undoubtedly the best place for him to cross the calamity. He turned into a stream of light and swooped down. Yi Xian's expression was solemn, and there was a trace of madness in his eyes. He sat cross-legged on the mountain peak, and his body was steaming with extreme bloody light. With him as the center, an extremely terrifying aura shot out in all directions. Rumble. The mountains shook, and the world exploded. When Yi Xian completely revealed his cultivation of the tribulation stage, the boundless sky gradually darkened, completely covering the boundless mountains. In the thick black clouds, there were thousands of thunderbolts raging. The calamity is coming. Like the thunder from the ninth heaven, like the waves of the vast sea, when Yi Xian spoke, the wind and clouds in the sky changed. The nine-colored thundercloud shone brilliantly and floated in the sky. Crack! A bloody thunderbolt streaked across the sky, illuminating the world. With an unimaginable power, it struck toward Yi Xian. Heartbroken mountain, blood sea battlefield. Yuan Ling had his hands behind his back. His eyes were deep, as if he was looking into the distance through the blood sea battlefield. The strange black fog around him was fluctuating. No one knew what he was thinking. He is crossing the calamity. The blood sea overturned the sky, and the shadow took shape. A blood-colored shadow quietly appeared behind Yuan Ling. It is easy to cross the calamity of man, but it is difficult to escape from the inner demon. He reached the tribulation stage in 4 years, which is a heaven-defying feat. It is extremely difficult to cross this calamity, Yuan Ling said deeply. The heaven-destroying halberd has recognized him as its master, and he has the incomplete 6 Tao rules in his body. Can't he cross the inner demon calamity? The bloody shadow asked. The inner demon calamity has nothing to do with cultivation. It is an interrogation of one's soul. If he really has no desires and no emotions, he can cross this calamity. But you have to know, since the beginning of the world, who dares to say that they have no desires and no emotions? Even those who have become immortals in the earth immortal world dare not say that. Yuan Ling sighed. Chapter 133. Then, if he can't pass this tribulation, then you and I. The blood-red shadow said in horror. Don't worry, I have always been patient with him because the heaven-destroying halberd has recognized him as its master. Even if he can't pass this tribulation, with the heaven-destroying halberd by his side, it will definitely ensure that he doesn't die. If he fails to pass the tribulation and becomes a killing machine, it will save us a lot of planning and can also speed up our plan, Yuan Ling smiled. Listening to Yuan Ling's explanation, the blood-red shadow said, Yuan Ling, I have always felt uneasy about this boy. You should know that the heaven-destroying halberd is an ancient killing weapon. Since the creation of the world, it has only recognized one master. This boy is the second master. And he has even refined the 6 Tao precepts. Are you not afraid? Enough. When did you become so paranoid? Yuan Ling's aura was stifled, and then he said coldly, You should know that you and I are supreme figures who survived the ancient war. Our hands are stained with the blood of countless gods and Buddhas. He's only a tiny mortal. How can he defeat you and me? Yuan Ling, it is better to be safe than sorry. When the heaven-destroying halberd recognized him as its master, I felt that things were out of our control. You should know that there is an important scripture in the Immortal scripture. Although I don't know if this is true or not, but what if? The blood-red shadow stopped talking and his aura fluctuated. Impossible. The origin spirit's aura surged as it roared in a low voice, I've studied the undying immortal scripture for several tens of thousands of years, and there's no such scripture at all. Moreover, he's only immortal. Could it be that his aptitude and comprehension are stronger than mine? Yuan Ling constantly forced himself to calm down, and his aura also gradually calmed down. Then, he said with slight fear, but you're right. It's better to be safe than sorry. It seems that we also have to make backup plans. In the vast mountains, the earth was collapsing. The 9-colored thunderclouds were turbulent in the sky and endless lightning struck down. The mountains were collapsing and the trees were turning into ashes. On the top of the mountain, a ball of blazing blood light was floating in the void and was constantly being bombarded by the lightning. Painful, very painful, very painful. This kind of pain didn't only affect Yi Xian's body, but also his soul. This was because this heavenly lightning tribulation wasn't a simple lightning tribulation. It contained the power of the heavens, and every time it struck, it would cause Yi Xian extreme pain. However, Yi Xian's cultivation was extremely profound. He wasn't afraid of this heavenly tribulation because he knew that this so-called heavenly tribulation couldn't harm him. Rumble. 9 days and 9 nights passed, and the power of the thunderbolts grew weaker and weaker until the 9-colored thunderclouds in the sky gradually dissipated. The number of thunderbolts striking down on Yi Xian also decreased. Clearly, this heavenly tribulation was about to pass, and Yi Xian's body was radiating an ethereal aura at this moment. Clearly, he was undergoing an indescribable transformation. The body of a half-immortal. That's right. The half-immortal body. This was an evolution in the level of life, and also the first step to turning a mortal into an immortal. Rumble. His blood and qi were like the sea, and his body was like glass. Yi Xian's face was filled with pain, and even his soul felt like it was being torn apart. However, he knew that he was developing in a good direction. As long as he could pass through this pain, he would be a big step closer to becoming an immortal in the mortal world. A month passed. The 9-colored thunderclouds in the sky disappeared, and Yi Xian's face was no longer filled with pain. His body was glowing. It was a kind of blood-red misty light, but there was a touch of immortal charm in it. Rumble. Golden lotuses fell from the sky, and sweet dew surged from the ground. The vegetation around Yi Xian had been destroyed, but in this vision of heaven and earth, it quickly bloomed with majestic vitality. The body of a half-immortal was formed. When Yi Xian opened his eyes, a faint immortal light flashed in his eyes. He clenched his fingers into fists, and it seemed like he was going to crush the space in his hands. His body seemed to be made of glass, and people who looked at him didn't dare to feel blasphemous. This is the body of a half-immortal. Yi Xian murmured to himself, and a touch of excitement flashed in his eyes. He could feel that although he was still in the tribulation realm, the world in front of him was obviously different. This feeling was indescribable, but it gave Yi Xian the illusion that he wanted to break open this world. It was as if he could break this world, he would step into a mysterious and unknown world. Yi Xian kept calming himself down, and suppressed this uncontrollable emotion. After a dozen breaths, his fluctuating mind gradually calmed down. The tribulation of the inner demon didn't come. Yi Xian was slightly confused, and he murmured to himself. Buzz! All of a sudden, golden lotuses filled the sky, and immortal light shone. While Yi Xian was deep in thought, a 10,000-foot immortal gate slowly appeared in the sky, and a faint immortal sound came from all directions. Such a scene stunned Yi Xian, and then he looked gloomily at the 10,000-foot immortal gate in the sky. Rumble! The 10,000-foot immortal gate slowly opened, and a huge amount of immortal qi spread out from the gate. A ray of Tongtian golden light spread out, and it enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian, 20 years old, and after 5 years of cultivation, you are qualified to be the fire sex side deity. Now that the immortal gate is opened for you, Yi Xian, hurry up and enter. It was vast and majestic. A voice came from the 10,000-foot immortal gate, and Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and his face became gloomier. Who are you? Yi Xian stood in the void, and his voice was strange and inexplicable. How dare you? I am the Thunder Sect's righteous god, and I am here to welcome you into the Earth Immortal realm. Hurry up and enter. Thunder rumbled from the immortal gate, and millions of lightning flashed in the sky. Thunder Sect's righteous god. Yi Xian said eerily. He looked around at the world, as if he wanted to see through all illusions and see the essence of things. This world was very real, so real that Yi Xian felt like he was about to ascend. It was as if as long as he entered the immortal gate, he could immediately become an immortal. Become an immortal. This was what Yi Xian had been thinking about day and night, and it was a desire that was buried deep in his heart. However, Yi Xian knew very well that he had not reached that step yet. The scene in front of him now was simply impossible. Moreover, Yi Xian was very calm, very calm. This was because the world he was in was at the end of the world, and it was called the Heaven and Earth Prison by the Earth Immortal Realm. How could the immortal gate be opened in this world? What a realistic scene. Is this the inner demon tribulation? Yi Xian knew that he had unknowingly fallen into the inner demon tribulation. Everything that he was seeing now was just an illusion of the inner demon tribulation. There was a trace of madness in Yi Xian's eyes, but there was also a touch of enthusiasm, and there was no fear in his eyes. The great tribulation of the inner demon was silent and didn't seem to have the slightest bit of power. However, Yi Xian knew that this kind of calamity was the most terrifying thing. Chapter 134. When the heavens and earth were created, all living things were born. All living things had emotions and desires. Even Daluo Jingxian, who was beyond the heavens and earth and was not part of the 5 elements, was no exception. For all living things, as long as they had desires, they would produce inner demons. And now, Yi Xian was experiencing the great inner demon tribulation. It was a desire that was born from the depths of his heart. Rumble. The heavens and earth exploded. 6 paths of reincarnation. The blood-red light around Yi Xian disappeared, and the light of the 6 paths of reincarnation surrounded him. Facing his own great inner demon tribulation, Yi Xian's face was filled with venom. His voice shook the heavens. The so-called inner demon is just a desire born from my own body. Let me, Yi Xian, see what this great inner demon tribulation can do to me. Yi Xian swung his arms and punched out. The 6 paths of law turned into fist radiance and blasted towards the immortal door. It caused the endless void to collapse violently. It was a terrifying scene. The 6 paths of reincarnation buried all living things and used it to overcome the great inner demon tribulation. This was very suitable for Yi Xian. Bam! The immortal door exploded, and a loud sound filled the sky. Before Yi Xian could react, the heavens and earth suddenly changed. When Yi Xian saw his surroundings clearly, he was completely stunned and speechless. In the vast firmament, in the endless void, immortal cranes were soaring, and fairies were singing. Immortal palaces were floating in the immortal clouds. The blazing immortal light illuminated the past and present. Rumbling purple clouds rose from the east, forming a 30,000-mile purple cloud bridge that led to the 9 heavens. Above the 9 heavens, a vast and boundless heavenly palace, as if it had been standing here since ancient times. 99,999 white jade steps led to the vast heavenly palace. The white jade steps rippled with immortal light, and misty immortal chi rose from them. In the vast heavenly palace, on the celestial emperor's throne, Yi Xian was wearing the celestial emperor's battle robe. The dark gold celestial emperor's battle robe was noble and majestic. He sat there with the celestial emperor's sword in his hand. Below him, countless immortals and gods knelt and kowtowed. We pay our respects to the heavenly emperor. The heavens trembled as celestial light filled the sky. When this scene appeared before Yi Xian's eyes, he clenched his fists tightly and his face flushed red. Above the 9 heavens, overlooking all living beings. Wasn't this what Yi Xian wanted the most? At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were tightly shut as he took deep breaths. The sounds of worship in his ears caused his body to tremble. Immortals and gods bowing their heads, standing tall in the 9 heavens. This feeling is truly wonderful. After around a dozen breaths of time, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and looked at the prostrating immortals and gods below. A wisp of intoxication flashed through his eyes as he imprinted this scene deeply into his mind. However, a fake is still a fake. One day, I, Yi Xian, will truly rule over the 9 heavens and look down on all living beings. I will also recreate this scene. Crack. The heavenly emperor's sword broke into 2 and was casually thrown to the ground by Yi Xian. He tore apart the heavenly emperor's battle robe on his body and swung his fist with incomparable confidence towards the immortals and gods in the 9 heavens. Rumble. The illusion shattered and heaven and earth turned upside down. When Yi Xian opened his eyes again, he was already in an extremely terrifying and strange place. The world was dark and the souls of the dead were wailing. A long river of blood flowed from the east to the west. In this endless sea of blood, miserable white bones bobbed up and down in the sea of blood. Countless vengeful spirits and evil spirits emerged and howled at Yi Xian. Kakik. Thousands of vengeful spirits and malicious spirits surrounded Yi Xian. Their eyes were sinister and sorrowful, and their mournful and unwilling howls made one's hair stand on end. Yi Xian, do you still remember me? A malicious spirit floated out and kept circling Yi Xian. His bulging eyes were terrifying and the blood on his face was dripping. Wasn't this Wu Jun who was killed by Yi Xian in Jiangnan City? Uncle. Uncle. Do you still remember me? A weak voice sounded out. A young child's eyes were bleeding, and his neck had long since been broken. He tilted his head and smiled sinisterly at Yi Xian. Isn't this the child from the Nangong family? Yi Xian. I died so miserably. Give me back my life. The Li siblings had their heads separated from their bodies as they walked towards Yi Xian with their heads in their hands. Their mournful and unwilling laughter caused one to feel an extreme sense of fear when they looked at them. Yi Xian. You killed my father and my daughter. I'm going to take you to hell. Gu Dingtian and his daughter were bleeding all over. They were walking towards Yi Xian with a bitter smile. Chilly wind blew and the dead spirits cried. The figures killed by Yi Xian kept appearing around him. These vengeful spirits and malicious spirits were either crying or laughing. Their pale hands were grabbing towards Yi Xian. Resentment filled the sky and the dead spirits came for his life. The sea of blood was surging and the world was crying. Yi Xian was in the middle of it. His face was expressionless as he quietly watched the numerous dead spirits coming for his life. The 6 desires are heartless and the world is heartless. If I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Even if I, Yi Xian, am sent to hell, I will still be the head of all ghosts and the lord of hell. The world exploded and everything was annihilated. Yi Xian's voice was cruel and malevolent. His entire body emitted a vicious aura that reached the heavens, and that extremely poisonous and tyrannical aura caused the endless sea of blood to churn. All of you, go to hell. Rumble. Yi Xian's entire body erupted with a demonic light that shot into the heavens. He punched out, directly shattering Wu Jun into pieces. When he slashed out with his sword finger, the Li siblings howled miserably. The Nangong family's child was directly crushed to death by him. Wherever Yi Xian passed, the vengeful spirits and malicious spirits howled miserably. The endless sea of blood surged. He seemed to have turned into a sea of blood butcher. Wherever he passed, he would cause endless slaughter. Killing one is a sin. Killing 10,000 is a hero. Killing 9 million is a hero among heroes. Yi Xian roared violently. When he punched out, the Tongtian demonic fist seemed to have shattered the ancient and modern world. Countless vengeful spirits and malicious spirits howled miserably and trembled. They were all annihilated by his fist radiance. Rumble. The sea of blood was shattering and the world was shaking. The so-called heart demon illusory realm was cracking like a spider web as if it would break into pieces at any time. A mere heart demon illusory realm. How can these demons and monsters hurt me? Yi Xian's voice was domineering. His unbridled aura filled the world. When he took a step out, he had already walked out of the blood sea illusory realm. The blood-colored river behind him exploded and disappeared without a trace. Bang bang bang, 6 explosions sounded and the door appeared. The 6 paths of reincarnation door rotated slowly behind Yi Xian. It was as if 6 great stars were rotating. It rippled with an aura that could destroy heaven and earth. This was Yi Xian's law and Tao. He wanted to rely on the 6 paths of law to break through the heart demon illusory realm. Wang. Time seemed to be reversing and space seemed to be hanging upside down. The world where Yi Xian was rumbling and rotating. After an unknown amount of time, a scene appeared in front of Yi Xian. This made his expression instantly turn gloomy. A look of dread flashed across his eyes. In a simple and unadorned courtyard, there was a child's laughter and a loving face. The fragrance that assaulted his senses was unbearable. That touch of warmth kept attacking Yi Xian. Chapter 135. Everyone had their fears. Everyone would more or less feel uneasy about certain things. Even Yi Xian was no exception. Yi Xian believed that he could kill for thousands of years and was not afraid to fight against the 9 heavens alone. Even if he had to fight against heaven and earth, he would not back down. However, the scene in front of him made Yi Xian's heart tremble. He did not know how to face it. Loving mother, little sister, brother. The 3 of them were very lifelike. They were smiling at Yi Xian in a courtyard. Yi Xian's eyes were a little dazed. In the depths of his memory, this courtyard was where he used to live. He was only 5 years old then. It was so long ago that Yi Xian felt like he was dreaming. This dream had never woken up. It was as if it had brought him back to that pure and innocent era. From the desire to become an immortal, to the power of the celestial emperor, to the vengeful spirits demanding his life, all kinds of inner demons were destroyed by Yi Xian. This was because Yi Xian's heart was like a boulder. He was not moved by external things at all. Finally, the inner demons produced the most terrible thing. That was the kinship that Yi Xian had always been attached to. Yi Xian knew that kinship was a kind of warmth and a kind of dependence to him. However, it was also this kind of kinship that tied him down and made him stay in this world. It was even more restrained. How could Yi Xian not know that if he severed his kinship and pursued the Tongtian Great Way wholeheartedly, he might have already ascended to the Earth Immortal realm and become a legendary immortal? However, Yi Xian was a human with flesh and blood. Although he was vicious and ruthless to his enemies, his actions were only to pursue what he wanted in his heart. Two choices were finally placed in front of Yi Xian. Either he killed his loved ones and set foot on the Tongtian Great Way, or he sank into the sea of bitterness, never to be reincarnated. In this life, people had to make many choices. Often, some choices would change a person's life. The choice that Yi Xian was facing now might be the most critical turning point in his life. To kill or not to kill? Yi Xian raised his trembling fists and the 6 doors behind him began to rotate. Looking at Mother Ye's kind smile, Yi Xian's face turned pale and he couldn't bring himself to do it. "Xianer, look at how dirty your clothes are. Did you get into a fight with someone again?" Yi Xian's mother asked kindly. Although she was blaming Yi Xian, her eyes were filled with love. At this moment, Yi Xian's arms drooped down. His eyes were dazed and his body glowed. He turned into a 5-year-old child and let Mama Yi tidy up his clothes in a daze. "Big brother, hurry up and eat. Mama made your favorite braised carp." Yi Ling was at the age where she was just learning to walk. She was pulling Yi Xian's arm and constantly shaking it. "Mommy, I'm so hungry." Yi Ping was only a 3-year-old child and he was bawling loudly at the dining table. Such a scene made Yi Xian's heart palpitate because it was the deepest memory in his mind. Even if he died, Yi Xian couldn't forget it. Because this year was the year when they were chased out of the Yi family and settled down in Jiangnan. Okay, let's eat. Let's eat, Yi Xian muttered to himself, completely immersed in his mental demons. He turned into a 5-year-old child and under Mama Ye's lead, the family finally sat down at the dining table and had their first reunion meal. "Brother, this fish is for you." Yi Ling picked up the fish in her bowl and gave it to Yi Xian, her tender face full of joy. "Brother, I want to eat the fish head." It was Yi Ping's voice. "Xianer, you have to eat more. When you grow up, you have to take good care of your younger siblings." Mama Yi smiled kindly. "Mother, I will definitely take good care of my younger siblings." The 5-year-old Yi Xian ate the fish in his bowl in big mouthfuls, his eyes full of warmth and gratitude. It was all because this scene had really happened to him before. Time sped up and the scene changed. In the kitchen, Mama Yi was carrying her children and eating the remaining fish bones on the plate. The 5-year-old Yi Xian secretly watched, his hands tightly clenched together. The wind and snow were intertwined and it was freezing cold. Yi Xian held the stolen fish bones tightly in his arms and was beaten viciously by the restaurant owner. When the restaurant owner left, Yi Xian was bruised all over and staggered back home. Today was Yi Xian's mother's birthday. When he sent the stolen fish bones to Mama Yi looked at Yi Xian's bruised body and sobbed, hugging Yi Xian tightly in her arms. Time flew, and the years were like a song. Yi Xian was completely immersed in his inner demon's illusion as he relived what had happened all those years ago. Just like that, year after year passed. When Yi Xian was 10 years old, he shielded Yi Ling tightly under his body and allowed the many bad students to beat him up. "Brother, will you protect Ling forever?" Yi Ling asked feebly. "Yes, as long as I'm around, I won't let anyone bully you," the 10-year-old Yi Xian said firmly. In autumn, the two brothers sat on a haystack. "Brother, I swear to the heavens that one day, I will become a superior person and let Mother, Ling, and you live a prosperous life." I, Yi Xian's younger brother, was born extraordinary. "As long as I'm alive, I will protect you for the rest of your life." The two brothers swore to the heavens on the haystack. The scene sped up and time passed. Yi Xian met his first love when he was 12 years old. Xia Qingzhu, who was dressed in white, was smiling faintly at Yi Xian like a fairy in the wind. Brother Yi Xian, will you marry Qingzhu when you grow up? The young girl asked shyly while shaking the young man's arm. As long as you don't leave me, I, Yi Xian, will definitely marry you, the young man confessed loudly. Kinship and ignorant love made Yi Xian sink into oblivion. He had already completely integrated into this world, and it was as if he had returned to that distant era. The year Yi Xian was 14 years old was the year he suffered from a terminal illness. However, in this mental demon's illusion, the terminal illness did not strike that year. Yi Xian grew up healthily, and his younger siblings did well in school. Xia Qingzhu was also by his side. A look of bewilderment flashed past Yi Xian's eyes. He felt that something was amiss, but in the warmth of kinship and love, that bit of doubt disappeared. Time passed little by little, and everything was progressing in a good direction. When Yi Xian was 18 years old, he was admitted to university. Xia Qingzhu was always by his side, and his younger siblings were admitted to a key high school. During university, with Xia Qingzhu's company, the two of them started a business with great difficulty. In just 3 years, they formed a business empire, and the group under their name entered the top 500 in the world. Several years passed, and Yi Xian's business was successful. He had a beautiful woman by his side, and his younger siblings had their own lovers. Yi Xian's mother was radiant, and there was no trace of decadence on her face. When Yi Xian was 25 years old, he finally welcomed his wedding. The Yi family congratulated him, and the Xia family married off their daughter. In the world's most luxurious hotel, under the gaze of many friends and family, Yi Xian and Xia Qingzhu married. Chapter 136. The smile of a loving mother, the congratulations of his younger brother and sister, wasn't all of this what Yi Xian once wanted? On their wedding night, Xia Qingzhu lowered her head shyly. When the red candlelight was extinguished by Yi Xian, the wedding room was filled with boundless spring. A year passed. In the hospital's delivery room, Xia Qingzhu's painful wails could be heard. With the sound of a baby crying, Yi Xian, accompanied by Mama Yi and the others, rushed into the delivery room excitedly. Mr. Yi, congratulations. It's a boy. The doctor congratulated him and handed the baby to Yi Xian. My son. Yi Xian, who was a father for the first time, was so excited that he couldn't control himself. He took the baby in a hurry, his face full of happiness. Hubby. Xia Qingzhu said weakly. Yi Xian carried the baby and walked quickly to his wife. He was as happy as a child and said, Qingzhu, look. This is our child. Xia Qingzhu snuggled in Yi Xian's arms and was full of happiness. She said, Hubby, this is our child. Let's call him Yi Shaoxian. Yi Shaoxian. Yi Xian murmured to himself, then quickly nodded and said, Okay. Let's call him Yi Shaoxian. Time flew by like a white steed passing a crack. The days passed. Yi Xian's mother was happy to coax her grandson every day. Yi Xian's career was thriving. His wife was dignified and virtuous. She took care of the family in an orderly manner. His younger brother and sister were also married. Yi Xian was unable to extricate himself. Yi Xian was 50 years old. His hair was already gray. His son had also grown up and had his own lover. Yi Xian's mother was old. His younger brother and sister also had their own children. The once poor family finally had children. This life was peaceful and happy. Yi Xian was 60 years old. His hair was already white, and his wrinkled face was like the dried bark of an old tree. It was proof that he had entered his later years. That year, Yi Xian finally had a grandson. However, it was also that year that a serious illness struck, causing Yi Xian to be bedridden. In a luxurious villa, Yi Xian's eyes were lifeless, and he couldn't even move his body. His entire body was wrapped in medical tubes, and an oxygen mask was placed over his mouth to provide him with a large amount of oxygen to sustain his dying life. By his side, there was the old mother Yi, the younger brother and sister he wanted to protect for the rest of his life, and the wife and children he loved the most in his life. The house was filled with children and grandchildren. They were sobbing and crying. A sorrowful mood was spreading in the villa. "Grandpa, don't leave Xian, A little girl held on to Yi Xian's aged hand as she sobbed. "Dad, don't worry. I've already found the best doctors. They're on their way," Yi Xiaoxian said with a sorrowful expression. "Xian, you won't die." Yi Xiaoshuan's mother's eyes were filled with tears. "Brother." Yi Ling, and her brother were both sobbing. "Hubby, how can you be so cruel? Are you going to abandon Qingzhu?" Xia Qingzhu cried sadly. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were cloudy. He looked at his family in a daze, and he kept recalling his life. He married and had children. He was filial to his parents and took care of his younger brother and sister. When he was on his deathbed, he had children and grandchildren by his side. Logically speaking, his life should have been perfect. However, Yi Xian didn't know why, but there was a hint of unwillingness in his heart. He felt that he had lost something very important. This thing was very important to him. It was as if it had already disappeared when he was 14 years old. Yi Xian tried his best to think about what he had lost. However, as his heartbeat became weaker and weaker, he still couldn't remember what he had lost. It was difficult to breathe, and his heart was failing. Yi Xian's body was emitting an aura of death. His body was gradually turning cold, and his eyes were starting to lose focus. It wouldn't be long before he passed away. At this moment, the loved ones surrounding Yi Xian no longer had grief on their faces. They actually had a strange smile on their faces as they looked at Yi Xian with eyes that had a trace of blood in them. "Am I going to die?" Yi Xian kept asking himself as he lay on his deathbed. "Yes, I'm really going to die. I've lived a life of glory and wealth. I should be satisfied. But, why, my heart is telling me I can't die yet. I've lost something very important to me. Me? What did I lose? Ah!" Yi Xian felt as if his brain was being pricked by needles. He howled in pain, but he endured the pain and tried his best to recall his life. Who am I? Who am I? Is the person lying on the sickbed really me? No, he's not me. No, he's really me. Yi Xian howled in pain as if he was babbling nonsense. However, his body was emitting a terrifying demonic light, and the space around him was exploding violently. This scene caused Yi Xian's family members to change their expressions. Their eyes were sinister, but they were also extremely flustered. It was as if the situation was out of their control. "Xian, don't worry and go. I'm very satisfied to have a son like you. Brother, don't worry. Second brother and I will take care of your children and grandchildren. Even if you pass away, we'll treat them like our own. Hubby, after you pass away, Qingzhu will come to accompany you. We'll still be husband and wife in our next life." All sorts of warm words were heard, but it only made the demonic light around Yi Xian even more terrifying. Rumble. The sky exploded, and the world collapsed. A beam of demonic light seemed to shatter the ancient world, and it seemed to break through the barriers of time and space. Buzz! Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. His wrinkled skin stretched, and his pale hair turned black. His body, which seemed to be made of glass, was emitting a light that had never been seen before. Who am I? I'm Yi Xian. I'm the undying heavenly sovereign. I'm the man who will ascend the 9 heavens and look down on all living things. The void collapsed, and the world exploded. Yi Xian roared at the sky. The demonic light of the Tongtian bloomed around him. His hair fluttered, and he seemed to have gone mad. How is this possible? Mama Ye's face was pale. She screamed, but her voice was extremely ear-piercing. This world is so real. It's so real that I almost died in this mental demon tribulation. Yi Xian's eyes drooped, and his body was trembling. Just a little bit, just a little bit. If not for Yi Xian's final radiance, he would have died in this mental demon illusion. Kakik. All of a sudden. Mama Yi laughed eerily, and the rest of his relatives looked sinister. A cold voice sounded in Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian, so what if you've woken up? Your heart tells us that you can't break through the mental demon illusion we created. Your greatest weakness is your shackles to your family. If you want to leave this place, you have to kill your family with your own hands. But can you do it? Chapter 137. He. The heavenly demons danced wildly and made strange noises. This also made Yi Xian's face extremely sullen. A fake is still a fake. Today, Yi Xian will sever all emotions and desires and kill all of you one by one. Heaven-destroying halberd. Rumble. The void was shaking and the world was exploding. Yi Xian's glabella glowed and a 3-inch blood halberd shot out from his glabella. The 3-inch blood halberd expanded in the wind and was directly held in Yi Xian's hand. The blood-red halberd and ancient patterns on the body of the halberd were emitting an unprecedented evil aura. First kill my wife, then kill my son. The roar shattered the mountains and rivers and shook the earth. Yi Xian's face was emotionless and cold. When the halberd blasted out, Xia Qingzhu and Yi Shaoxian were directly killed on the spot. You killed my sister-in-law and my entire family. The blood-red halberd was cold and terrifying. When it blasted out, it killed all of them. Yi Ling, Yi Ping, and all the children and grandchildren in the mental demon illusion were all smashed into pieces by Yi Xian's merciless halberd. Boom boom boom. The void shattered and the sound of explosions rang out. Yi Xian seemed to have gone mad, but his body and soul were trembling because the mental demon illusion was too real. Everything that Yi Xian experienced was deeply engraved in his mind. Every time he killed someone, his heart seemed to be dripping blood. Everything was silent and the world was silent. A benevolent face, a pair of sorrowful eyes. Mother Yi smiled sadly and said, Xian, kill me. This way, you can truly walk out of your heart's demon illusion and pursue what you want in your heart. Clang. Looking at Mother Ye's benevolent face and hearing her sad words, Yi Xian's body trembled. The heaven-destroying halberd in his hand fell to the ground with a loud bang. Yi Xian knew that the Mother Yi in front of him was fake and was also formed by the mental demon. He only had to wave the halberd and he could completely escape from the mental demon tribulation. However, this was a choice, an extremely heartless choice. If Yi Xian really slashed with the halberd, it meant that Yi Xian could also do the same to Mother Yi in reality. However, how could Yi Xian do such a heartless thing? The reason why the mental demon illusion was so feared by immortal cultivators was that it could reflect reality and force a person into a dead end. Now that Yi Xian couldn't get past himself, that was the most terrifying part. Mental demon illusion. Xian, do you still remember? When you were young, I carried you on my back and walked for a full 10 miles because of a bad cold. Only then did I send you to the hospital. That year, it was windy and snowy. That year, my hands and feet were covered in blisters, but I worked hard to raise enough money for your medical fees. I hoped that you could grow up healthily. Don't say any more. The Mother Yi that was formed by the mental demon made a sorrowful voice. It also made Yi Xian's face go crazy. He clutched his head and screamed loudly. Obviously, he was forced to live by the choice in front of him. Rumble. Suddenly. The heaven-punishing halberd was undergoing a great change throughout the eons of time. Buzz. The blood-red halberd floated into Yi Xian's hand. Before Yi Xian could react, a thick demonic light enveloped Yi Xian's body. Kill! A cold voice sounded out from the heaven-punishing halberd, causing Yi Xian to feel as if he'd been bewitched. The black pupils in his eyes gradually disappeared, and his eyeballs actually turned deathly white. Emotionless and without desire, killing the world. Rumble! Yi Xian struck out with his halberd. The mother Yi that was formed by the mental demon suddenly exploded and disappeared without a trace. The world cracked like a spider web. With a loud explosion, Yi Xian finally walked out of the mental demon illusion. The world was clear and bright, with green mountains and clear waters. On the peak of the mountain, the vegetation was lush and green. A cool breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of grass. Yi Xian knelt on the ground. His deathly white eyeballs gradually returned to their black color, and the strange devilish light around him also dissipated. The heavenly punishing halberd turned into a black light and once again fused into the center of his brows. What did I do? Yi Xian asked with a trembling voice. He stared fixedly at his hands as a sense of guilt that seeped into his bones continuously grew in his body and mind. It made him feel so painful that he couldn't breathe. Just now, he seemed to have been injected with some kind of terrifying power. He became emotionless and ruthless and killed the mother Yi that was formed by the mental demon. But when he regained his consciousness, the heart-wrenching pain made Yi Xian feel so guilty that he wanted to roar out loud. The mental demon was easy to overcome, but the human heart was hard to escape. Even though Yi Xian had passed through this great tribulation of his inner demons, cultivated a half-immortal body, and was invincible in this world, he couldn't pass through this trial. Yi Xian's hair was messed up. He roared to the sky. His eyes were filled with madness. He roared as if he had gone mad. This roar seemed to be asking the heavens why they did this to him. Rumble! The sky exploded and the earth shook. When Yi Xian fell into madness, the power in his body completely erupted. The terrifying power shot out in all directions. Bang! 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 The mountains exploded and the earth collapsed. The endless void was annihilated and restored. The vegetation in the forest turned into ashes. The shrill and crazy roar caused the birds and beasts in the forest to explode into a bloody mist. The scene was like the end of the world. Boom! All of a sudden, Yi Xian's aura went crazy. He rushed into the clouds as if he had gone mad. He completely disappeared from the mountain peak, leaving behind the vast mountains that had been destroyed. It was as if they had been bombed by a nuclear bomb. In the vast world, thousands of miles of clouds. Yi Xian was like a blood-colored meteor as he moved about in the sky. The clouds were exploding, and the void was exploding. That unparalleled power rippled in all directions, causing people to feel an extreme sense of fear when they looked at him. Chi! Suddenly, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He stretched out his arms and allowed his body to fall to the ground. Yi Xian was tired. He was really tired. This had nothing to do with his cultivation. It was a mental fatigue. He just wanted to have a good sleep. When he woke up, he wondered if he would be able to wake up from the sorrow in his heart. Eastern Sea. The sky and water were the same color. The blue waves rippled and the sea was clear. A huge wave came crashing, causing a fishing boat to rise and fall in the sea. It was as if it would be swallowed by the waves at any time. Sis! Quick! Look! There's someone in the sea. There was a young man with copper skin, but there was a hint of delicateness between his brows. He was dressed in simple clothes, and he was shouting at a woman with a panicked expression. Beichen, don't joke around. With such a huge wave, if a person was in the sea, he would have sunk to the bottom and been eaten by the fish. The woman was about 18 or 19 years old. She frowned and reprimanded the young man. Sis, I'm not lying to you. Come and take a look. As the young man's anxious voice sounded, the woman's expression changed. She quickly came to her little brother's side and looked at the sea. The waves rose and fell, and the sea was blue. A slender figure was floating in the sea. His messy hair covered his face, making it impossible to see what he looked like. "Quick, save him." Looking at this scene, the woman said anxiously, "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.